Survivor Specialist Phil and Alexa are back with another episode of Winning Survivor. We are already up to our 7th episode. For anybody who's been listening to this over the course of the last 7 weeks, congrats. It's been 7 freaking weeks. We have 3 episodes left after this. So if you're listening to this all at one time, hey, you only got 3 episodes left. But wow, 7 weeks we've been doing this already. It's pretty crazy. We are joined once again, as always, by Once Upon an Island, who has been with us since the beginning. This was partially his idea. And tonight we're going to be talking about 4 winners that are a little bit more exciting maybe than last week's winners, or at least their seasons are, in Denise Stapley, John Cochran, Tyson Apostol, and Tony Vlachos. Alexa, you look like you're chomping at the bit. What do you got?
I'm just saying, we kind of will rank these in groups of 4. This, I would actually say, is probably one of our stronger groups of 4.
I think if we're talking about, I agree with you, Alexa. If we're talking about especially if we're talking about which 4 seasons, if I had to go rewatch it, a set of 4, I don't know why I would, but if I had to, this would be the 4. I think out of all of them, that would be the best 4 to watch again.
I love the ones. I think our Aris to Parvati streak was pretty good. But this one, at least in terms of winners, they're all very different.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
I don't know. You guys are crazy. I would watch Gabon through Heroes Villains every time, because if I had to sit down and watch 4 straight seasons, I would pick that every time. So I think you're all crazy. But
yeah, we'll get to one of them. But season wise,
I actually think in terms of my season rankings, I think I always end up with 3 of these seasons ranked pretty high. And I actually think that I always end up where Philippines is my 3rd favorite out of this group of 4. And I think some people might overrate Philippines, but this isn't the season ranking, I guess. This is more of the player story. And the first one is Denise in Survivor Philippines. Really this season that it does get ranked so high because it saves Survivor. I mean, the 4 seasons before this are atrocious. They're so bad. And whether the winners are good or whatnot, the seasons themselves are just not fun to watch. And then we come out with this season. We get a breath of fresh air with the 3 tribes, which now we're all tired of. And we see Denise come out on the Mat Singh tribe, which ends up being one of the worst tribes in Survivor history. Denise is only immune 1 time the entire season in terms of going to tribal councils. But a really impressive win, and we just saw her on Winners at War. Wes, what do you think about Denise?
Well, I like Denise. I liked her from the very first episode, which I think not all winners get that great look in the first episode. Sometimes it takes a little while to get used to warm up to them, or it takes a while maybe for them to really introduce us to their story. But right from the beginning, Denise, she's presented to us, especially when she's talking about Zayn's tattoos, and it's now she's sharp. I mean, of course, I'm not sitting there staring at Zayn's tattoos, but she's observing what some people consider the best player ever of Survivor, his tattoos, and knows exactly what all of them mean. So
you had me in the first half there.
Yeah, I really believed it, but no, you're right.
No, I'm serious, with the exception of obviously Zayn being the best player. I'm serious about the rest of that.
Yeah.
Oh no, we know.
Okay.
Yeah. And she has again. Well, we talked about Albert and how his lower third was baseball/dating coach that people loved. She has one of you see Denise and you're oh, she's a sex therapist. What? Do we talk about that? But I think mostly people focus on the therapist part, and that so shows throughout her entire season. So and you even see that because you just said, Wes, you weren't looking at his tattoos. Why would you wouldn't think to immediately do that, but she doesn't think to do it. It's just natural.
Yeah, even if I was on the island with him, I probably wouldn't have thought of it. So it's definitely something I think to consider throughout the whole season, is that how she approaches things like a therapist.
Yeah, and I do think that that's what helped her so much on this season. And I know people the interesting part is that it does say sex therapist, but at the end of the day, therapist, no matter what kind of therapist you are, unless you're a physical therapist, which is different, but any type of therapist, you're delving into the most personal parts of somebody's life, and you need to know how to navigate that without making them feel bad, with making them feel better about it, and make them feel good. And she does that. At the end of the day, yeah, she's a sex therapist. That's awesome. Here's the 40-something-year-old woman who talks about sex with people all the time. Great. But also, it's really just she knows how to talk to people. And she knows how to tell you, I'll hear you, I'll listen to you, and I'll agree with you. And I think ultimately, I can't believe people like it as much, because sometimes, and especially Winners at War, when she would do her big head nod with the wide eyes, it would drive me nuts sometimes. But then there's other people, like when we had Pete Yurkowski on, he was saying, no, it's so good. You believe everything she's saying. And I'm just like, I guess it's that therapist mentality of like, yes, everything you're saying is valid and correct and right. And it works for her this entire season.
And I think it's Malcolm who at her final tribal, I think he came off as super mad at her. It sounds like he was kind of playing that up a little bit, but he starts going into his question and she does the nod, and he's like, stop that. I know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if he was winking to her or not, but that shows that like it took people that long to realize that. And I think that's kind of an intuition that she has. That's not active gameplay. And I mean that as a good thing. A lot of just her self is naturally good for winning Survivor.
Yeah. Absolutely. I know, Phil, you mentioned earlier how like this season saved Survivor. I'm not sure. Is that like official news from somewhere, or is that just kind of like what we say? Because
I'm saying in terms of more. I'm saying in terms of more like it renewed the fans' faith in Survivor.
Oh, okay.
Because
I did double check the viewership numbers, and I thought this was interesting. Is like, Heroes versus Villains at like 12, 13 million an episode. Nicaragua actually held up the whole season with like 12 million, which I was blown away by. But then when you go to Redemption Island, it just like drops. It like goes to like barely hanging on at 10, like a almost 2 million person drop. South Pacific goes back up, and then One World goes down. Philippines goes back up. Caramon goes down, and then Blood vs. Water goes back up.
Well,
and then
it also
like, emotional roller coaster.
It also has to do with the fact of fall versus spring. Fall seasons. This isn't just for Survivor. This is for fall seasons in general. Fall seasons are generally more watched because unlike in 2020 when there was the coronavirus in the spring, normally days are getting longer. People have more things to do in the spring as it's working towards summer, so they're not spending as much time watching TV. Whereas when a fall season of TV starts, it normally starts about mid-September. Days are getting shorter, weather's getting colder a lot of places, and people are spending more time inside watching those types of things. So it does happen, and granted, that doesn't happen as much now because we have so much with streaming services and things like that.
Yeah, this is back before that was popular, though.
Yeah, but in general, fall seasons do better than spring seasons because of that.
I guess that makes sense. I was thinking more maybe the quality was affecting, but then I saw Nicaragua's numbers, and I'm like, maybe not as much.
No.
Definitely not.
But I thought Nicaragua may have been riding off of the high of Heroes versus Villains.
Totally. I think so.
At least
Nicaragua was riding off the high that I went to college and made everybody I lived in a dorm room with watch Survivor. So it was actually working off that high. Oh, yeah. Everybody who sat down to watch Survivor with me, the first 4 seasons they had to watch for college was Nicaragua through One World.
Yeah.
And I can't say like, and they all stuck with Survivor somehow. I mean, most of them still watch it. And I'm like, and you all started with that shit? Oh my God.
Well, they started with like a low bar and they're like, this is an interesting concept. And then they saw better seasons.
Yeah. And so really what I'm saying more is with Survivor Philippines, you have Jonathan Penner, Russell Swan, and Mike Scoopin before he became, what he is now. And we were all actually excited to watch those 3 people play again because we did feel a little cheated on most of them. Whereas with Ozzy and Coach, it was like, okay, they're big characters. And, with Russell and Boston Rob, we had just seen them. But with this one, we hadn't seen them in a while. And Alexa just disappeared, but she'll be back. But with this one, we hadn't seen them really in a while. And so, I don't know. I just think like, people were excited about that. And then on top of it, you have great new characters like Denise and Malcolm and Abby Maria and RC and Jeff Kent. You had a lot of great characters on this season, and I think it helped it. And I also think what helped is in a 3-tribe season, I really give Survivor credit to stick with the 3 tribes as long as they did here, because it was the first time they were doing it for 3 tribes, not more than 2, but just 3 tribes since Survivor All-Stars. We hadn't seen it in that long. And they came out and Matt Singh loses the first 4 immunity challenges. And yet they stuck with it. And I think it actually worked out better for them. And I think that's why we all fell in love with Denise and Malcolm as much as we did, because we were like, holy shit, this tribe can't tie their own damn shoes.
They're like Oolong 2.0.
They are.
Right. In current Survivor, you never even get the opportunity to meet a Denise and Malcolm because you swap after less than a week of them being out there. So
I feel like they've gotten off of that though. Since like Game Changers, I feel like they've they've gotten away from doing that after like 2 episodes, swapping to a
Yeah,
tribe.
not 2 episodes. You're right, but I guess like pre-merge, you're swapping.
Yeah.
It's also very rarely that they go 4 boots on a season of 18.
Right.
They normally will do it. If it's a season of 18, they'll normally swap at 16 or 15. Very rarely do they wait till 14 now. But again, like I said, I think it really worked on this season because we got to know Denise and Malcolm better in 4 episodes than we got to know some of the winners from recent seasons over the course of a whole season.
And it worked because they made it to the end. If they only made it to the merge and got booted, it'd be like, oh, we're spending all this time with people that don't even ultimately affect the overall narrative for whoever the winner is,
Yeah.
So it actually
and I think
it worked out well.
Yeah, and they also did. Sorry if I'm on a delay and I'm interrupting you guys. I think for this one, because again, this is a captain season, and historically, captain seasons are not super well received, but by myself too. And I love Philippines. They casted this really well. They did not use the captains as a handicap. Malcolm, great casting choice. Like there's RC, like you said, Abby, Pete, so many good casting choices. There's like 2 or 3 quote unquote duds, but overall it's a really good season. You have Lisa, you have like the child star, like just a wide variety of people, and that really elevates it because you're not always talking about like, it's not like, ooh, Penner and Scoopin and Russell, they're gonna go at it. Like, no, you never talk about that.
I think this is actually a great way to, like, if you wanted to ever, I know Edge of Extinction, like they try to, I know Jeff's like fake explanation for it was like, these people got to the end, but they couldn't win, which was obvious. Like, obviously we knew up front that was BS, but like, even if that's what they were thinking when they picked people, like, not the best way. I think here picking, like, making the excuse of here's why these 3 people are back, of like they were all medically evacuated. It feels more like we picked characters over strategists, and sometimes that just makes for the best seasons.
Yeah.
Characters make seasons, strategists make for interesting discussions. But
well, and I also think with this season too, they didn't pick characters that were going to eat up all the screen time.
Well, Penner.
Yeah, but Penner doesn't eat up as much screen. I don't think he eats up all the screen time though, because his tribe keeps winning early on. And then if he does get a surge in confessionals, it's because his tribe then loses 3 times in a row. So I do think that, they did a really good job. Like Scoopin, Penner, Russell, Swan weren't going to be Ozzy and Coach where they were going to be every freaking confessional, or Russell and Boston Rob where they're going to be every confessional. And I think that's why Denise works so well. We see her from day one, and her and Malcolm get together and be like, let's work together. This will be great. And we already have more of a connection to them than we do to Russell Swan. And we don't constantly have Russell Swan hitting us over the head with, remember me, I've played before. Remember me, I've played before. And I think they did a really good job of casting that. We get to know Lisa better than we get to know Scoopin. And I would argue that Jeff Kent is just as good of a character on this season as Jonathan Penner is.
I mean, he would have won $600,000.
I know. So,
it's an unbelievable confessional.
Unbelievable. So that's the only thing I'm thinking is I just think that they did a really great job of putting people who weren't too big of characters, because Denise ultimately, as we do see, I think even in this season, she doesn't get that many confessionals, but then when we watch her again in Winners at War, she's not a huge character.
No.
She's a great strategist. She gives good confessionals, but she is not a great character. And so to have a winner like her on a season, you can't have just one person like Russell or Boston Rob dominating the screen time the whole time. You need a good array of characters who are supporting cast members. And even if they feel like more main characters than her sometimes, your protagonist is normally more boring than the supporting characters. Luke Skywalker sucks compared to Han Solo. And so that's just the way it is, but we still like Luke Skywalker. And I think that that's what they did with Denise here. They did a really good job of putting everybody around her, and how is she going to navigate all these psychos and being on the wrong side of the numbers and going to every tribal council and blah, 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 blah. How is she going to do this and still win the game? And this is one of the best told stories Survivor did for a winner.
With her and Malcolm, for sure.
Absolutely.
Like they work hand in hand. And even when they're split up, you're still like, no, Denise and Malcolm get back together. And it's not even like that. It's not like Rob and Amber. It's like, it's cool.
It's quite the opposite.
It's a friendship, and there's nothing more to it. So like, it's even better. You're not like, well, they won't they? You're just like, they're friends, and like, but really good friends. And I don't know.
Yeah, and I think every winner, like, she gets as we're going through this, I'm realizing that like most winners get torched during their final tribal. Like most winners have a tougher final tribal than they do like blow it out of the water. But they always have their kind of like their killer moment. And I think for Denise, admitting that she had gone to every single tribal council, because I think that's something people sort of talked about, but weren't.
She's the only one to have done it too.
Yeah, and it wasn't really a huge conversation topic. And that was kind of, we were told that as a viewer a couple times leading up to it.
Yeah.
So then you could watch and say like, oh my God, she's going to do this. Like she's going to go to every single one and somehow win. So that makes you root for her too. And you always root for an underdog, and she is the ultimate underdog.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think Denise, I think she's a lot. Probably because she's the winner here. But I feel like here I like Denise a lot more in Winners at War. Winners at War, I feel like she had one moment, and then otherwise she was pretty much put on the back burner for what it felt like for most of that season. But here, I think here, like right from the beginning, as I said, like when she's like observing Zayn and like all of his tattoos and just the way she's able to like, because she goes to every tribal and sure she does get some votes along the way, but she like amazingly socially integrates herself into like her new tribe, and then and they still go to tribal, and then when she gets to the merge, it's like Denise is like a chameleon, you know, in a sense.
Yeah.
She's like able to just like
No one talks
blend in with whoever she's with, you know.
Well, and I think what's really great about her too is that in the pre-merge portion of this game, despite going to all 6 tribal councils, she receives 1 vote the entire time. And I think that's really impressive because first of all, you're starting off on a tribe that's only 6 people.
Yeah.
So to get a stray vote here and there isn't that hard to do. Zayn goes home, she's in control of that. Roxy goes home, she's in control of that. Angie goes home, she's in control of that. And then in the biggest vote of the pre-merge, which is, do I get rid of Russell Swan or do I get rid of Malcolm? That is literally what that episode is. That episode is, who do I, Denise Stapley, get rid of? It is not, oh, should I, should it be Denise? Could it possibly be Denise? Both of those guys were vying for Denise's vote. And I think that that's what's really amazing. It showed how good of a social player she was, that she had convinced both of them. And after we watch the season, it doesn't seem like it's that hard to convince Russell Swan of things, but she convinced both of them that they were her number one. And I think that was great. And then she goes on to her other tribe and she blends in right away when she gets to Calabow. And the only vote she gets, this is the only vote she gets the whole pre-merge, is when Dawson votes for her, because Dawson gets the wool pulled over her eyes by every single player on the Calabow tribe.
Yeah.
Calabow.
Yeah. And that Russell vote out, like that episode is so good. And it's such good foreshadowing towards the end, because Russell is like, so like, I don't want to say he's the narrator, but he's a huge part of the show until he goes. And he, like at Tribal Council, I think he's singing Denise's praises, and what he says is going to happen exactly happens. And the only person who's there to witness it is Malcolm, and he's in her alliance the whole time.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I know like Russell, like people make fun of him and stuff, and he does a lot of stuff to make fun of, but I really like Russell. Like, not like, I know he's not a great survivor, but like I really get like the sense that like Russell's like a really solid dude, like outside real life.
Yeah,
so I like Russell. And
he took make fun of Russell. We're just making fun of him in good fun, because I really like Russell.
I completely agree, and I know he took it really hard after he got voted out of this season. He felt he went through a really, really low time afterwards. But I like Russell, and I think Russell this Russell could go down as one of the most unlucky Russells in the history of the show.
Oh yeah.
First of all, with the whole Galoo thing, he leads. See, that's what's interesting about Russell is he leads one of the most dominant tribes in Survivor history, and then passes out and gets medevaced from the game, comes back a second time and is on one of the most pathetic tribes in Survivor history, and is generally considered one of the main reasons for that. There is no greater moment in Survivor history. There is no greater David versus Goliath than Russell Swan versus Ladder. It is the most David versus Goliath moment in the history of the show. And like, I do say that in a loving, joking way, but also like, those are the moments, unfortunately, that everybody associate with Russell. They completely ignore that in Samoa, he was unbelievable.
Yeah, everyone loved him in Samoa. I think maybe there was like a moment where people didn't like him, but another great moment this season is when he's looking for like hidden immunity idol, and it's like, remember, like I think it was like, what was it, like the lid of, or was like the handle on the lid?
Yeah,
for, like,
and the flash came on the screen.
Yep.
Yeah, and he's like, the editors are gonna show me looking for this thing, and they're gonna show it on screen what I'm looking for. He like narrates exactly what happens, like just great. But we're here to talk about Denise.
let me ask you this, Wes, because I feel like you probably look at this a little bit more than us, but I want to ask you what you think about this. So once the merge hit, in the first 4 tribal councils post-merge, Denise only votes for the person who actually goes home once.
Yeah.
Does that impact her standing to you at all or no? Now, granted, something else to keep in mind is 2 of the people she voted for would have been voted out, but they both played immunity idols in Jonathan and Abby. But technically, she doesn't vote for the person who goes home. Does that knock her at all or no?
Would I knock her win for that? I think it's hard to tell sometimes because sometimes people vote wrong, and I think they know who's going home. They vote wrong on purpose. For example, when Sandra votes for fair play when Rupert goes home in Pearl Islands, even though it's never confirmed in the show, I really think she did it on purpose, like knowing Rupert's going to go. So she's like, I'll throw a vote on this guy that I know Rupert doesn't like. I think there's more to it than what they present in the show. So they don't always tell us why this person voted wrong. We're just to assume that they're out of the loop. Here, I think Denise had a real uphill climb in terms of she because she goes from her tribe, then she integrates to a new one, and the two tribals later, she's in the merge, and it's like she's just kind of left out of the loop. I feel like because people are kind of ignoring her because she's a chameleon. So do I knock her for it? Not really. Now, I mean, Fabio, I feel like is a good person to knock for voting the wrong way because his was he could have known, but he didn't. Whereas I feel like Denise had a lot more work to do to. I don't know.
Yeah, she was always coming late to every party.
I don't fault her nearly as much as I would someone like Fabio, who I think Fabio has moments, but voting the right way is not one of his moments.
I'm more using it as a statement of I think the whole they voted correctly 100% of the time as opposed to somebody who voted correctly only 3 times. I don't think it matters.
Yeah,
to be completely honest. And I just wanted to bring that up because I think Denise plays a great game here. And 2 of the times that people would say, oh, well, she only voted for the person who was voted out 60% of the time. But 2 of those times was Jonathan when he plays an idol at the merge. And really, she had integrated herself with Scoopin, with Lisa, with Malcolm, with Abby Maria to vote out Jonathan. So they had done it correctly.
Yeah.
And then the next vote, she votes for Pete, which honestly was just the plan. It was is it going to be Pete? Is it going to be Jeff Kent? What's going to happen here? And Jonathan Penner doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And then she votes correctly for Artis. And then when Pete does go home, she votes for Abby Maria. But so people would knock her for that, at least in terms of if you were really trying to write it out in a data way. What is it that, Denise did right? People would knock her for this. And I don't think they should.
Yeah. And I the only thing I would consider knocking her for is her relationship with Abby. And she is not kind to Abby throughout. And does Abby end up voting for her? I don't remember.
I'll double check real quick.
Abby does vote for her. The only person, so Carter and RC do not vote for her.
Okay, that's what it was.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew 2 people did, and I just forgot who.
Yeah, because Carter spelled Scoopin's name in the most ridiculous way.
Like Dunkaroos.
Yeah. but I think that she could have and possibly should have lost that vote because she was not great to Abby. That's the only thing that sticks out to me as a bad thing that Denise did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will say, I know, Phil, you say you don't knock somebody for not voting the right way every time. I will say if somebody votes the right way every time and wins, that is impressive.
Yeah.
Because that means that they should be the ire of whoever got voted out every time. But I won't not. It's a plus if you do it and win, but I don't put it as a minus if you don't do it and win.
Agreed.
Totally.
I just think if you do it though and you win, that is pretty impressive that you were able to get. You literally were at part of the reason why everyone went home.
And if you voted incorrectly a lot, it usually means that you're the underdog, and people like an underdog to win.
Of course, Denise and Malcolm are the underdogs all season, even though Lisa socially was an underdog. Lisa Welcho, who I did like, but
I liked it too. I think she got a lot of crap.
I think she was a great 1 season character. I'm not sure if she would.
We don't need to ever see her again.
Yeah,
but she was a great one. This is a great 1 season character for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think she's a really good character, but also again, once is enough. I don't think she'd ever play again though. I don't think she wants to. I think she got what she needed out of it. I also think she was pushed on us because of all the crying and everything, and the fact that I overcame being a child star, and everybody was like, how did you ever overcome that? How did you get through being a child star? That was like her big story, but I do think it was a fun perspective we hadn't seen on Survivor yet. And so I think it worked. But again, that kind of goes back to Philippines was such a great edited season. And I know there's some invisible characters, Artist, Carter, Katie, I can't even think of her name. Sarah.
When we get to
Sarah?
professional counts, we'll talk about that.
Yeah, not Dawson. What's the other one's name? The girl who quits. Dana. That's
Dana.
it.
Yeah, she gets like kind of half quit. So it's like.
So like I know that there's some bad under-edited characters here, but there's also some very well-edited characters here that make this like a very fun season to watch unfold, because even though part of you is like, it's got to be Denise or Malcolm, right? There's still an argument to be made for pretty much every single other player there, except for Abby, Maria, and Carter as the game goes on. And I think that's what makes it work.
I'm just a bit piggybacking off you, Phil. The final 7 all are like great characters, until they're voted off or into the finale or whatever. Like the final 7, even though Carter like barely gets any confessionals, I feel like Carter's a lot of moments on the shows that are not confessionals that like get you to know Carter, especially when he like, what was it at the time Penner asks who's going home, or was that Jeff Kent? I forgot who asked Carter that.
Oh, that was so bad.
I think it was Penner. Wasn't it?
Penner.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going home. Or Penner's going home like that.
It was awful. It was absolutely awful.
Penner was the best person for that to happen to.
Yeah,
because like that's such a Carter thing. Like things like that just tell you who Carter is. He never had to tell it to the camera. It just happened, So.
Absolutely. And I love it. I mean, like I think Carter, obviously we would have liked to have had more from him, but I do think like you're right. I mean, even Pete at Final 8, I think Pete's a good character, and I think that's just like what works here. And to have somebody who's calm and collected the entire season, work her way from the worst tribe ever, the oldest woman on the tribe ever, one of the worst tribes ever, and work her way all the way through the game, and then get the better of player after player after player. She gets the better of Jonathan Penner. She gets the better of Malcolm. She gets the better of, these are players
Scoopin's delusional.
Yeah, Scoopin's delusional. But like these are players that we would consider some of the best players in the history of the show in Penner and Malcolm. And she gets them all. And I mean, when Penner goes home, it was between Penner and Denise, because Penner was smart enough to realize like, kind of got to get rid of Denise.
Yeah.
You know what? This is the last season to not have a tribe swap. Like it's considered a tribe absorption officially there, because really they're not tribe swapping. They're just going to their 2 tribes. This is the last season with any tribe without a tribe swap.
Wow.
So from here on out, every winner has had to endure at least a tribe swap, if not 2. So
would you knock Denise for that or no?
No. I just think it's like an end of an era.
That's just crazy that like.
Oh, I agree.
Still, that it's season 25.
And I do think too, like, this is actually probably harder for a winner than a tribe swap, because she has to go into a brand new. She has to go into a tribe that has known each other for what, 18 days, 12 days, whatever it is, 2 weeks essentially, and she just has to go in and be like, "Hey guys."
Yeah.
To me, Samoa is the last like classic Survivor season, because there's no tribe swap, but also there's no like Redemption Island, which are the other 2 seasons that have no tribe swap. Samoa's like the last like
Heroes Villain
classic Survivor season.
Villain.
But that's a returning season. Like
True.
I don't know, the difference though.
Absolutely.
Do you guys think Denise could win? Denise's type could win again, because I think Denise wins. I think Denise self-admittedly like kind of lost traction when she.
I think Denise did some things right here that can still be used today. Like her getting with Malcolm is just like what we saw with Tony and Sarah. Like that is such a good pair, but you have to get rid of the other half, because I feel like we haven't really, and correct me if I'm wrong, is there a season where like a pair like a Denise, Malcolm, Tony and Sarah gets to final 2 and 3, and then it's like really between this pair that's been working together all game? I guess obviously
Dom and Wendell
Island.
Yeah.
As I said it, I realized it.
I think it goes. Go ahead, Alexa.
No, I was going to say, I feel like generally not really. And people go into the game and they're like, I'm looking for my Malcolm or I'm looking for my Denise. But that's really hard to find, I think, in modern Survivor, because loyalty was still generally important. And now like people try to get rid of their Malcolm at like final 8.
Yeah, way too soon.
At the very end.
Yeah, way too soon.
And yeah, we kind of saw that with Kelly and Lauren. They kind of like had something, but they didn't go far enough. But I do
JT
think
and
like
Steven, I guess
JT and Steve. I think what it comes down to is, and this is just how much Rob and Amber changed the game. and how crazy it made it. If the concept of a sexual relationship is off the board, people don't look at it as threatening.
Yeah.
And that's just crazy to me because Figgy and Taylor was considered threatening, but Wendell and Dom made it to final 2.
Yeah.
like if you think about it that way, it's crazy. And Denise and Malcolm is one of the greatest pairs in the history of the show. And nobody looked at them as a legitimate threat because they weren't going to ever have sex.
I'd argue them and JT and Steven are a couple of like the greatest pairs to make the final 2. I mean, people might say Rob and Amber, but really, if I'm going to put 2 people back into another season, Denise and Malcolm.
I'd rather watch Denise and Malcolm.
I agree.
Yeah.
Because they're funny, they're so different. They're awesome.
And I don't think that I don't think that any of us like Denise as much if Malcolm isn't as likable as he is. And I also think what made us all love Malcolm so much is that he sided with the older lady and was kind of like the big meat shield. And the way they work together, we just don't see it enough on Survivor. Like we don't see it enough. And good on Denise and good on Malcolm both for figuring it out, because whichever one of them makes it to the final 3, which it was Denise in this situation, but had it been Malcolm, wins the game in a landslide.
Yeah.
So
now,
good on
I guess
them.
we do need, I know we're about to ask, can Denise hold up today? But I think another question is, does Denise beat Malcolm or does Malcolm beat Denise in the final 3 of this season?
I think Denise probably still wins, but it's close. It would have been really close. Like I'm talking like it would have been like a 5-3, something like that vote. I forget how many people were on the jury, but it would have been something like that. I think it was a 6-1-1. So I think it would have been 5-3.
There's a good chance Malcolm wins, though. I feel like Malcolm was well liked by everybody out there.
Well, I think Penner probably votes. I think Jeff Kent probably votes. But whoever you put on the jury who is sitting there in the final 3 that wouldn't be there ends up voting for Denise. I think, I mean, maybe it does happen. Maybe it does happen. I think it would have been close, though. I think it would have been a great final tribal. And unfortunately, we never really see those. And that's why when we do get a Dom Wendell situation, it's like, oh my God, this is epic. But we just don't see it enough. But I know, Wes, you were saying she did do some good things. I think Denise is great. Yes. I think she could win Survivor again. I just think she kind of got lost out there in Winners at War. Her type of player, though, I think this is, again, the type of woman who can win Survivor. I think if you're a female player, I told you this once, and I forget.
This is the game to emulate right here.
Yeah, I forget which season I had said it with earlier. Maybe it was Kim Spradlin or something, but this is the game to emulate where you can take down a male returning player. We just saw it 2 seasons prior with Sophie Clark. This is the type of game to emulate because it's not too under the radar, and people can see your moves and really appreciate it. And I think this is what you would want to do. And for older women who would go out there to play Survivor, especially play the game like Denise Stapley or like Janet Carbon, because we see Janet Carbon almost play the exact same game later when she's teaming up with Tommy.
Yeah,
and Janet probably gets a different edit too if she does, of course, go at the end and then win than what she got, because a lot of people were rooting for Janet, but I'm like, I don't see her as the winner.
Yeah,
but she has a good story, so I kind of get what everyone's talking about.
The ultimate fallen angel.
But if she had won, she would have had both. So
absolutely.
So I guess you said, Phil, that a player like her can win again. Did you already answer this, Alexa?
Yeah, I think she can. I think like we said, like especially for like the women's game, I mean we talked about this to date this podcast, we talked about this with Russell Hantz about an hour ago, but that people like Cass, and not to compare Cass and Denise, but if Cass was a guy, people would have looked at her a lot differently. I think that that Michelle game, that Denise game is a little bit like the Michelle game. And so I think that's how that type wins. And I don't think this new Denise sits up there at season 41 and people say, well, you didn't do anything, you voted incorrectly. Yeah. I think people liked her. I think people felt understood, and I think people felt heard by her, and people are going to vote for someone like that.
Agreed.
I agree with both of you. I think Denise is the kind of archetype, and I think she could win again. I do think she made it too far in Winners at War to necessarily go into another season as a non-threat. But then again, she was so underrated as possible. But it's like, if you put her down on paper, winner, and then she made final 6, it's a little bit hard to overlook that.
Yeah.
But I do think a Denise type could win again, and I think Denise in the right casting season that's casted correctly could win again.
Absolutely.
So she has a double whammy here. She could win again if on the right season. I just don't know if they'll ever cast her again because of Winners at War. But
someone who will never play and therefore never win again, John Cochran.
Oh, hold on. We haven't done our classic confessional count.
Oh, that is true, Alex. We got to do the confessional count. You tried. You tried to steal my thunder.
I'll breeze through this real quick. So I forget what, I think it was South Pacific was last season with like a ton of people with single digits.
Mhm.
This season has 8 people with single digit confessions. The Carter, I'm going down in order. Artists, Dawson, Dana, Angie, Roxy, Zane. Of course, it's expected from like Angie, Roxy, and Zane because they were the first 3 boots.
And even Dawson because she was the first boot from her tribe.
Yeah.
No, Dana was.
Well, didn't Dana quit in the same episode?
Yes, they both went the same episode.
It was the same episode,
So I
yeah.
guess technically, yeah. So it's because it's so like back ended. It's like the back ended is loaded with the confessionals. So it's like the front end is just like a perfect boot order, with the exception, I think, of Russell Swan personally.
Mhm.
I think it's like such a perfect boot order for the confessional count because like the people with the most confessionals really did make it like the furthest.
Yeah.
Guess how many Denise had?
36.
32.
37. So Scoopin at 40, Lisa Welchel at 58. That's your final 3. Malcolm at 65. Abby Maria 31. Penner 49.
Malcolm almost doubles her.
Russell Swan in 4 episodes at 21, but
Mhm.
he actually had the most per episode. But I think they were just like getting as much out of him as they could in 4
Absolutely.
episodes. Yeah. So it was like well edited when it comes to like people who make the back end of the show, in my opinion,
Mhm.
which is
Agreed.
what makes it such a great season.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we'll jump into our next season, which is what makes it such a bad season. Alexa, you just want to say his name again because I know I'm stealing your thunder. Just say his name
No,
again.
I mean, does he get 68 confessionals? That's going to be my guess.
Well, and the thing is, I think we should talk about the confessional count right off the bat here, Wes.
Do you want to on this one?
Yeah, because it goes from Philippines to Survivor Caramoan.
Yeah.
That's where we're going now. The second iteration of Fans versus Favorites. John Cochran wins it. And this is arguably the worst edited season other than Redemption Island in the history of the show, because every single person out there knew John Cochran was going to win the game from like final 17 on.
Yeah.
And the problem was when we got down to the end of the game, nobody left had good edits. There was nobody left in the game that had any type of confessional count. Wes, let's start off there and talk about it.
So very quickly, I forgot to mention this because I wanted to, and I was waiting. Scoopin went 5 episodes, 0 confessionals.
Wow.
Which is like if anyone thought Scoopin had a chance, like that was like your red flag.
Yep.
So in this season, I will tell you that there are 4 people with single digits, which sounds better than the last season than Philippines, but I feel like the confessionals are spread so evenly, with the exception of Cochran, which kind of reminds me of Redemption Island.
Yep.
So what was your guys' guesses on Cochran?
I said 68.
Yeah, and I would say he had like 75.
It was 67.
Okay.
This season had 413 confessionals. Philippines had 435. So it's like a 20 something drop here. Whereas before we were not even hitting 400 in the past seasons, by the way.
And this is a
Philippines
bigger
was jump.
cast too.
Yeah.
This is a 20-person cast. So you think 20 less confessionals on this season?
Yeah.
That's 20 less, or 20 confessionals less with a 20-person cast. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah. So like if you want to talk about maybe like here's your confessional counts through from the merge on to like, so like was Cochran the obvious runaway favorite? Corinne had 22. She's the first boot of the merge. Michael, which was, I believe, don't quote me, was the person that Corinne was like, I love gay people. Was that him?
was
Yeah,
him.
it's not a great confessional.
No, she literally calls it her gay, but continue.
I think like the gay too. It gets worse the longer it goes on.
I think Mike really likes her though. Just throwing that out there too. I think Mike actually does really
That's
like
good.
her.
I mean, she loves him.
Michael had 14. Philip Shepard had 33. By the way, I think personally, I know you said from like final 17, which I don't know if there's exaggeration. For me, it was like once Philip went, it was obvious because Philip shockingly comes out of Redemption Island and comes into the season like actually having learned from Boston Rob. And sure, he's still like socially crazy, but like his strategy and like, but people are listening to him and doing what he says. And it's what?
I will say this. It's when Philip goes home that you know that Cochran's going to win, because you know Malcolm and Reynolds can't win anymore.
No.
That's also the big thing is as soon as Philip goes home, you know Malcolm and you know Reynolds are done. And then you look at the rest of the cast. Andrea, as soon as she steps on the island, anytime has a 0% chance of winning. So you knew she was out. Dawn had no chance. Sherry had no chance. Eddie had no chance. I know you're going to run through this, so go ahead.
Brenda doesn't talk.
Brenda has what? Brenda and Eric, I think, have a combined 14 confessionals, and they're both in the finale or something like that.
This is actually what I thought got interesting because Philip had 33, Malcolm is 35, Reynolds is 40, which is the second most of the season. So once Reynolds goes, it's like the rest of the confessionals are just like embarrassing. You have
and what is this? This is at final 7, right?
Reynolds is final 8, so now we're at final 7. Andrea Belke averages 2 confessionals an episode with 25. Brenda averages 1 with 13. Eric Reichenbach almost tripped there. Got only 15. Though to be fair, he was playing a much more under the radar game, averaging 1 an episode. Eddie with his with Dog Bar averaged 1.79. He had 25. Sherry had 21, averaging 1.5. And then Dawn, who everyone knew was not going to win, had 35, averaging 2.5. It's really like once Reynolds goes, the confessionals really shift over to Cochran, like all of them. Yeah. And Cochran has almost 5 per episode.
And I think that's an important part to preface this season because really we could have done this episode like what we're doing right now. How did John Cochran win? And like, what did he do? What is his story? We could have done that confessional, or we could have done this exact same video at final 9 of that season.
Yeah.
And it would have been like the same thing because how does he do it? He gets on a season full of not favorites. And the fans are not, like Alexa just said, not fans. And so when you have a season like that, and John Cochran is a good player. I mean, even in his first season, we see that he wants to be there. He just ends up on the absolute worst tribe for the type of person that John Cochran is. He knows the game like the back of his hand. And now you're going to let him play with fans who aren't fans and favorites who aren't favorites. And the only real favorite who was out there, and I will stand by this, the only real favorites, there were 2 of them. It was Eric Reichenbach and Malcolm, but nobody had seen Malcolm play. Yeah. So like Corinne is not a fan favorite. Everybody like Corinne is fun to watch, but she's a villain. She's not a fan favorite.
And Francesca is a joke as a favorite. I like her, but she is not a favorite.
I think that was a like, we're really sorry this happens to you recast, and then they put her on the same time as Philip, so they clearly didn't care that much.
Yeah.
Well, what were they supposed to do? It's a fan versus favorite season. Split them up half and half.
Yeah.
And Brenda, not a fan favorite.
No.
Dawn, not really a fan favorite.
Brandon Hance, you could argue, had a story in South Pacific. Therefore,
nobody. I will say this.
I think people liked him. I'm just saying I could see why they brought him back. That's all I'm saying.
And I just think like when you look at it that way, okay, so Cochran comes out. Cochran ends up on the favorites tribe. If you had to rank like who is the favorite to win from the favorites tribe, it's him. Great. Yeah. And then if you actually
Malcolm, depending from the very beginning, it's either him or Malcolm. It feels
exactly. And or Eric Reichenbach. Eric Reichenbach definitely had a chance because Eric Reichenbach's game in Survivor Micronesia is a really good game, and I think he was going to come out and try to prove something with the whole, I gave away the necklace and now I have to be better. But then you go over to the fans. And I remember like in the pregame, it's like, oh, who do you like here? And it's like, oh, Reynolds isn't too bad, and maybe Sherry. And then sure enough, Sherry and Reynolds are essentially the only 2 fans who actually show up to play the game. And Sherry deserves so much more credit than she gets because she gets none. But they're the only 2 who show up to play the game. So you knew the entire time who the gamers were on this season. There were no surprise players anywhere. And Cochran was able to just, waltz through this game. And you know what? Good for him because of how much of a rough time he had in his first season. This was so easy for him. He could have done this with his eyes closed.
I will say, I think I really, when I watched this, I thought Sherry played like an excellent pre-merge, but it's like,
she is the pre-merge.
Once the merge happened, she's done. And it's like, what happened to like this force to be reckoned with in the first half, you know?
Can I make a comparison here that people are not going to agree with? Okay. She is Joe Del Campo. Her and Joe Del Campo play the exact same game. Pre-merge, they are huge factors. They are huge factors. They impact the game so much, and who they want to go home goes home. And then once the merge hits, they are just gone. And the Survivor community only remembers what they did post-merge and how they were just kind of useless, or how they just, how did they get to the end, or how did they get as far as they did? And they don't remember that in the pre-merge, Sherry was running this game on a tribe that went to tribal council. She went to, was it 5, I believe, of the first 6 tribal councils?
Yeah, she went to a lot.
So many.
She went to a lot.
She wore through like 2 of them.
She went to, looking here, she didn't go to the whole time. No, she went to 4 in the pre-merge because Bacall actually surprisingly went to 4 in the pre-merge.
Well,
you may not believe.
Well, let's put our hand up on that. One of those was Brandon Hance going home, and that does
I'm
not
sorry.
count
Yes, I'm not counting. In terms of tribal council, she went to 4 out of 7.
Yeah, she went to 4 out of 7, and she went. The fans lost all of them except for the first one before there was actually a tribe swap. And I know that Brandon goes down as, oh, that was the 5th one and blah, blah, blah. No, Brandon did not go to a tribal council. So she went to all, like, her tribe sucked at the beginning. And then once the tribe switched, she no longer goes to tribal councils, and we totally lose sight of what Sherry's doing in the game.
Yeah. And it's like, this woman was dominating, and by the end, when she becomes the 2nd place, I'm like, I kind of get why she had a story in the beginning, but why did we abandon it? Like nothing else is going on.
Yeah, make the finale even remotely interesting.
Yeah, make it her versus Cochran.
Yeah.
That's ultimately what it was. She get. I know. Like technically, Cochran played a perfect game, which he did. I'm not discounting him. But, like, really, we should have built up Sherry a bit more here. Like,
I agree.
Got built up, even though he got 0 votes. So.
And I completely agree. I think Sherry was really good, and I'm sure if you looked at her confessional count, it was probably better at the beginning. We were just talking about Denise, though, and how Denise voted wrong a couple of times. In this season, Cochran votes wrong 1 time. And I know that it's going to show up on.
And it's the one time he knew he was voting wrong, I think.
Well, I was going to say, no, actually, there were 2 times
that
he does vote wrong. But I was going to say that when Andrea goes home, he votes for Eddie. But I'm pretty sure, did he know Andrea was going home?
Well, he voted for Eddie when Reynolds went home, if that's what you're talking about.
He also voted going home
for Eddie when Andrea goes home. I see that, yeah.
So I'm pretty sure the Reynolds one was actually a mistake, but I think the Andrea one was a split vote.
Yes, I believe you're correct, because they were worried about Andrea and an idol. Because she had one, from what I recall.
Yeah.
So I think you're right there. Of course, he votes wrong on Philip, but to be fair, that was also intentional. So intentionally, he voted wrong once.
Yeah, maybe even more. I mean, we'd have to actually look at it. I'd have to actually rewatch
right now. He votes. There was a tie vote in the pre-merge between Michael and Julia. He votes for Michael, but then on the revote, they vote for Julia. I mean, you can count that as a wrong vote.
But I don't.
I don't. Well, if you vote correctly on the revote, I count it as you're right. So.
Yeah. And the Malcolm thing was definitely because if Eddie and Philip tied, but if somehow both of them had idols, then they would have Malcolm go home. So that makes sense. Yeah. So really all of his votes that he did do wrong were split vote situations where he was strategically doing it. All of that is to say, just like when we talked about Boston Rob and Redemption Island, what Cochran does in this season is one of the most dominant performances of all time. There is no denying it.
It rivals JT.
Absolutely. Yeah. However, when I rank Cochran as a winner, I don't put him nearly that high because he's the only person who came into this season as like him and Eric Reichenbach, and I'll just keep saying it, are the only 2 people who returned on this season because they were good players, not because they were good characters. They're the only 2.
I got to tell you, so I have an interesting story when it comes to Andrea Belke. So there was a time where I wasn't watching Survivor between like China and through Cambodia. Those are the seasons like I missed because I was like in the Navy and like just wasn't around to watch Survivor. So when I finally came back and I watched Co Wrong and I watched Millennials vs. Gen X and then I watched Game Changers with my wife, and we're watching Game Changers. And I'm like, Andrea Belke, I'm like, I've never heard of her. Like I'd heard some people, obviously like Sandra, because I'd watched old Survivor. So after Game Changers, we went back and watched Classic Survivor. We watched Redemption Island. I'm like, oh, here's Andrea from Game Changers. Here's where she becomes a game changer.
Like, nope.
She doesn't vote out Boston Rob, which is what I thought she was going to do, by the way, to become a game changer.
Never happens.
And then I get to this season. I'm like, okay, this is not my 3rd time watching Andrea, even though it's her 2nd time playing. And I'm like, here's where she becomes a game changer.
What did you do?
Wes, you're preaching to the choir, man. I got so much crap for not putting her on my top 100 list for the Russell Hantz thing. And I don't believe that she belongs on there. And that's what I'm saying. Like, people make the mistake, and I know I'm like falling over here, but people make the mistake of saying that Andrea actually had a chance coming into this season. And I don't think she did. I really don't. And I think like we saw that as the season progressed. She plays the exact same game she played in Redemption Island on this season. And a lot of people will be like, oh, well, maybe she was Cochran's biggest competition. Well, if that was Cochran's biggest competition, then like good for Cochran. But like Alexa, we actually got to talk to Cochran at the David versus Goliath finale, and we were talking. Amazing guy, awesome guy. And he brought up a really great point. He goes, everybody always says that everything in this season was completely laid out for me. And he goes, a lot of it was definitely made easy for me. But I wasn't the one who was like, hey, Eric Reichenbach, get your blood pressure real low and pass out. And like, hey, Brandon Hance, can you please go absolutely crazy and like pretty much make people think you're going to kill somebody? Like, he's like, I didn't have control over those situations. I didn't have control that they casted a bunch of, fans who had never seen the game before. And so like, when I think about it from that perspective, when you actually like listen to that, you're like, you're right. Like he still had to go out and play the game, and he does play it. But this is the Cochran we expected to see the first time in South Pacific, and we didn't see it because everybody was just immovable. But on this season, like we got to see him play the game that you would expect a huge super fan to play.
I will say, okay, so we're over here knocking this cast, and I will say, obviously, they're not a great strategic cast, and this is like a very weak fans versus favorites too, versus the first fans versus favorites. But I will say something Cochran has to deal with here that I feel like not a lot of winners have to deal with is maybe not necessarily a strategic cast, but a very character-driven or I don't want to use the word crazy, but a very like outspoken favorite cast, because we have some big personalities here that he's having to balance. He has to balance Brandon Hance. He has to balance
Philip Shepard, thinking he's in charge.
What's that?
He has to balance Philip, who thinks he's in charge.
Yeah. Like Corinne, Philip, and Brandon are all like three like wildly like outspoken personalities that you have to balance, and thankfully for him they go early enough where he doesn't bounce them the whole game, but they are like usually got like one of them a season, and here you have three. It's like it's a lot.
And it goes back to the Jeremy quote of it's easier to play with people who know how to play the game than don't know how to play the game. Essentially this is like playing poker, you know what I mean? Like if you play poker with people who don't know how to play poker, you can't bluff correctly. You can't go all in correctly because they don't know what they're doing. So they just do whatever they feel like. And it's harder to actually play with that than with people who actually know how to play, because there's no reads, there's no tells. And that was kind of this season. Like Cochran had gone from playing on a season where I don't think the players were very good on that season either, but they were drinking the Kool-Aid and were just falling in line, to now he's got to play with people who all think that they're the biggest, baddest person on the island. That's not an easy thing to navigate. But actually, one of his best moves actually takes place in the first tribal council when he votes out Francesca, because him and Dawn were in total control of that vote. And it was, do we vote out Francesca or do we vote out Andrea? And he says, I want to keep Andrea. And if Andrea was such a great player and so intimidating, who would vote out Francesca a first boot over Andrea at the first tribal council? Well, clearly Cochran was onto something there.
I think Cochran this time, and it's almost apparent from the beginning, and probably because he's not playing with Ozzy, or maybe it's because he saw himself and he's just grown as a person, but he plays with a lot more confidence this time, which I think a lot of the best winners do, is they have confidence, even if it's not always earned. Most of the time it is because they're winners, but here he has a lot more confidence than he did in South Pacific. And it comes across, I think, in his interactions and the way he talks to people. And he's not like scared Cochran. He's more like, oh, I'm going to self-deprecate, but like secretly, I'm not like that. I'm not really not that scared.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the thing is with Cochran too, like the confidence comes also from the fact of like, I think he just felt better than those players. You know what I mean? Like, I think when you come onto a season and you're the first time player looking at Ozzy and coach and all of that, there's always going to be an inferiority there. If those two players weren't there, I don't think Cochran plays as scared or nervous on his season, because everybody's on the same playing field. But now you have like pros and you're an amateur and you need to prove that you belong. Whereas on this season, he comes out and he's like, okay, I'm on the pro tribe. But you look around and you're like, I'm probably the only pro here. I'm one of three pros. I don't know this Malcolm guy, and Eric Reichenbach's a good player, but he also gave up his immunity necklace. So I think like that helps the confidence, and we see him win 3 individual immunity challenges.
Yeah,
he becomes a challenge beast at the end of the game.
Well, there's a big asterisk next to those. Well, a couple of those wins.
They're weird challenges.
There was that one where he got the advantage, where I think like both times been used, like it's on the rope pulling one where the knots. And like every time somebody's got an advantage on that one, they win. And he had the advantage, and it was like kind of like he's gonna win. But so yes, he did win 3 individual immunities. I would put an asterisk next to immunity challenge beast.
He's a beast, Wes. You don't know what you're talking. He's a beast.
Yeah. I know Jeff really was built. I noticed it turned during the season. Jeff's like, "Oh, Cochran's winning all these immunities." I'm like, calm down there, Jeff.
Yeah, I agree. But so it's like when Jenna Marasco wins the shuffleboard challenge. But
Jenna
anyway,
and we're not calling her a challenge beast.
I know. When you look at this, though, he does win the final 4 immunity challenge, which ultimately, like, if you go back through time, when it's been a final 3, I'm pretty sure that if you were to sit down and say, did the person who won the final 4 challenge before final 4 fire making, did they actually end up winning the game? I'm sure more often than not, that person does end up winning the game, because it really is a big, I know Russell doesn't, but Russell beating Brett is the reason why Natalie White wins. Because if Russell loses that, Natalie White loses to Brett. And so when you look at this, Eddie is the person who goes home in 4th place. Do we give any credibility to the fact that Eddie could possibly have won this season?
No.
Wes's head's going to pop off his neck.
No.
And we've spent this entire podcast talking about people voting correctly or incorrectly. That's not something I pay attention to, but I know that Eddie, I think, has one of, if not the worst voting record of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
let's see. He voted correctly.
Like, votes correctly once or something like that.
He's a great character on the season, though. I know he's like terrible at strategy. He's
He voted correctly 3 times, Alexa. One of those was on a revote when he correctly voted for Malcolm. Mm-hmm. He voted correctly for Laura, who I think is a very, very forgotten player. She's probably the other fan who would have had a chance.
I literally know who that is.
Yeah, if she wasn't on a tribe that lost 4 times in a row or whatever, she would have actually been okay. She was like the one woman who they cast who was actually pretty good. And then the other time that he voted correctly was when he voted for Philip, which he was always going to vote for Philip. That was when the 4 horsemen round 2 pretty much happened. So, but like, yeah, Eddie was never going to win. I actually think Eddie probably loses to Dawn or Sherry, because I don't think that they respected him enough to be like, here's some votes, buddy.
Yeah. And I'm a Dawn apologist. Like I like her more than I think most people do, but if you've Dawn, Eddie, and Sherry, sure, Dawn cried a lot, but she played. She was a part of every vote. So in that situation, to me, you got to give it to her.
I know people.
I think Sherry
Dawn to Lil a lot. I like Lil a lot more than Dawn personally.
Wow.
Can I just say, though, if that was the final 3, that would be the worst final 3 in the history of the show, hands down, no questions asked. Awful, terrible, bad. Bye.
I would love to know how that, like, whoever wins out of that, like, how you re-edit that season. It's completely different.
Absolutely.
I do want to say we haven't really talked a lot about moves Cochran made, but one thing I think he did really well, and I think it's something we can carry into Modern Survivor, is at Final Tribal. There seems to be a lot of questions like, well, Cochran, are you the smartest, or how are you the best? And Cochran's like, he continues his self-deprecating route, which works well for the whole season for him, but it really works well at Final Tribal when he's not making a joke. He's just like, I may not be like I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, I may not be the smartest, I may be the strongest, but like, I only had better timing. That's the only reason I'm here. That's the only reason I did all these things, because I said better timing. My timing was more fortunate than everyone else's. So it's like not berating the jury in any sense. He's not like he's not having to build them up by saying, you're so much better than me, because we hear that now and it's like, yeah, okay, I get, sure, that's the reason you voted for me, or because some people do want to hear that, but I feel like I'm so like used to hearing that now. But like Cochran went a whole different route, saying like, I wasn't better than you, I just had the timing, and everyone can accept, okay, my timing's off, but I'm smarter than Cochran, I'm stronger than Cochran,
That's what makes you feel good. Yeah, that's a really good point, because a lot of times, like you said, everyone's like, oh, you're right, Phil. You were so much better than me. I had to get rid of you because you were going to kick my ass over here. But, which is probably true. But instead, I think being self-deprecating is a quality that isn't probably honestly not shown on Survivor now that I'm really thinking back. But in a Final Tribal Council situation, like you said, Wes, it's good because it's saying,
didn't mean to do that. I want to get this guy out of here because it's not the real Philip Shepard. It's absolutely obnoxious.
Yeah, he's got to go. But it's relatable. Like it makes it be like, hey guys, I'm here. Like we're just having fun, and I'm gonna make fun of myself, and you're gonna give me $1 million.
Yeah, I think it really does. It's a great way of saying. It's a great way of avoiding saying you're a bigger threat, that's why I voted you out, and more saying like, I did now, but it also avoids like, I'm just glad I'm here. I'm just lucky to be here, which is another thing people say when they get to the end, that's usually the reason they lose. But here Cochran like somehow works his way in the middle of both of those and says like, I just had the best timing and that's it. And I think that's like, I don't remember another winner using that, but I feel like if somebody else, if any of you guys make it on Survivor, use that, because I feel like it's still something you could use now and people will be like, yeah, that's a way to win Survivor. You have the best timing of your moves.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like that leads into, could John Cochran win again? And I think absolutely he could win again. But
John Cochran could win again.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah. I think it's just got to be a person that people don't know works for CBS.
Yeah, and I think like that situation will never happen again. I don't think we'll ever get a situation of half quote unquote fans and half or 9/10 quote unquote favorites. So I think like situationally that doesn't happen again. But I think the kind of like the leader who is never seen as a leader, I think that totally wins.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the Cochran archetype wins, but I think just the name John Cochran and he's smart for not coming back and Where's the War, because his name is just, it's a target. There's no season where Cochran can come back.
He was a reward.
Yeah, like maybe on a legend season if everyone's name is like the biggest name, but that's the only way.
Well, I would love to see him on, but there's a lot of issues that come with Cochran playing again, as I know he went to Harvard Law, because he works for CBS, and so I think that it would be difficult for him to come back and play a second time or for a third time.
On Winners at War though, so that apparently it's not that big of a deal.
Well, they probably would have knocked him off his writing position though.
Oh,
yeah, because I know in an interview with Dalton Ross, Jeff was like, he's the winner I would have wanted. I don't know if they actually offered it to him because of that situation.
No, it was confirmed it was offered him. I think he even said
he was the one they couldn't get, I think, Alexa. I think that's what Jeff had said.
The one that got away, perhaps?
He is. But that's okay. We don't need to see Jeff in love with John Cochran a third time. We don't need that.
And Rob on the same season.
Oh my God.
That would have been a love triangle.
Yeah. That would have been the whole story. It would have been the Bachelor Survivor edition.
And then,
all right, let's move on to the real Bachelor.
I do like that one. Wes, do you have anything else you want to say about Cochran, or should we move on?
No, nothing else specifically about Cochran. I will say that the next season we're about to talk about, in my mind, is the true fans versus favorites 2, but also is in a sense is the real fans versus favorites 3, even though it was never called that.
And it doesn't help that because we're on Survivor Blood versus Water, it's hard to call it fans versus favorites because it's family versus family.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like it was just all fans. But I do believe, and I know that Blood versus Water, when this cast first came out, I sat there and I said, why the hell is Kat on my screen? Why is Colton on my screen? Why is Monica? There are 3 people from Survivor One World. Are you kidding me? This is a joke.
Yeah.
But then when you really start to look at it, this is a really incredibly well casted season with Vetus
and the favorites.
Agreed.
Yeah.
They did a great job of casting across both like Aris and Vetus. Sure, we can bring Kat out there so we can get Hayden, Sierra and Laura Moret. Tyson, I don't know why they wanted Rachel so bad, but sure, Tyson.
I think they wanted Tyson so bad.
Absolutely. Jervis and Marissa
come out, I bet.
Yeah, Jervis and Marissa. Just phenomenal casting job. And I think that's why with Tyson, I actually give Tyson more credit than Cochran for his win in this season than Cochran and Caramoan, because even though Tyson doesn't sweep the jury at the end, and even though Tyson, I think, does get votes throughout the game, Tyson's game is so much more impressive because the players he was playing against actually deserve to be there. Now, Jervis, whatever. But Monica
Jervis, I'm glad Jervis came back.
I agree. Totally agree.
He's a season 1 legend. He needed to come back some point. I'm glad he came back for this one because this is a good one for him.
Absolutely agree.
He's not the best strategist, but he's a great character.
And I know that there's probably something in here that you'll tell me. I know Tina Wesson doesn't get very many confessionals in this season, and Katie. But if you're looking at it from not a confessional standpoint, if you're looking at it from when they hit the merge, I would say every player who made the merge in this season is a very good to great player of Survivor. And that might go down as a controversial statement, with the exception of Katie Collins. I think everybody else is a great to very good Survivor player. Jervis, again, he falls in either end of it.
He's the character aspect.
But he's the character aspect. Exactly. And I think that when you look at it, this post-merge is one of the best groupings of people we've really ever had in the show.
I think the only person who I wish had made the merge that didn't is Rupert. No matter what you think about Rupert, he is a character, and he would have. I would have preferred him over Laura. Nothing against Laura, but I prefer Rupert over Laura this entire season. Even if Rupert does his normal, like get to the final 7, 6, and get voted out because he's not a strategist, Rupert would have been great TV up until he got voted out. So that's the only person I wish had made the merge. But otherwise, the boot order works out really well. I know there's some fans of Candace Woodcock or Cody. I'm not a huge fan of her, but I think
Rupert's neither am I. But I still put her in my top 100 list. Okay, I still put her there.
Yeah,
she's not bad. I'm not.
Yeah, I personally can always do without Rupert, but I think like what you said earlier, Wes, this is fans versus favorites, and the fans are playing like Sierra and Hayden. They come out of this season.
Yes.
And I mean, Sierra goes on to play
Vitas.
Yeah. And then Vitas kind of stumbles to the finish line his next outing. But they're just big characters, and they're involved. It's not like they're the cousin who got dragged along to the end. They were playing.
Absolutely.
And it's so great because of Tina, though. Tina's like, I just want Katie to marry someone like Vitas.
Yeah, I know. And
give that a couple more seasons.
Second chance happens, and we're like, is Tina the worst mom in America?
Hey,
we will now investigate.
I checked on Instagram the other day with Tina.
I love it. But so when you really look at this, though, like Caleb is another one that we don't talk about. And unfortunately, Caleb passed away. But Caleb was a great Survivor player. When he votes out Brad Culpepper and just looks him in the eyes like, I had to do it. Like, you needed this to happen to you at this moment. It's epic. It's Culpepper absolutely epic.
Is a great addition, even though this season, I mean, for the time he's in the show, like, he was a great character.
Absolutely.
John
Cody.
Yeah, his wife.
Great characters.
His wife, I know, Monica. She's a super nice lady, which by the way, I do actually agree with. But Culpepper, like, his time in the game was very memorable.
Absolutely. And so like, I think like what we're saying is this to all build up to Tyson's actual story of Tyson already, just by being on this season and not being on Redemption Island or Blood versus or Fans versus Favorites 2, is already up against so much more than Boston Rob or Cochran was up against by being in this season. And having the interpersonal relationships be what tie them all together, and the addition of Redemption Island and all of that, it's really incredible how Tyson was able to navigate this game without ever really being in danger up until the rock pull, which always goes down as one of the ballsiest moves in history of the game. But I don't think it is. I actually think it's Tyson just sitting there saying, if I don't do this, I lose. If I do it, I go to Redemption Island and I win my way back in because I'm the best challenge competitor there is out here. So I'll just win my way back in anyway. So he didn't have as much risk involved in that as if it was a regular season, like when Jessica Lewis goes home 6 seasons later with it. But, Tyson was willing to make the big moves on this season. And he's another one, much like with Cochran. As soon as Rachel gets voted out and he stands there and he says, all of you are done. Every one of you is done. You're just like, well, we might as well just write Tyson the check. But the fun part of this journey is that Sierra, Hayden, Laura Moret, even Monica Culpepper, Vitas, Aris, Caleb, every one of them is along for the journey, the entire game. Tina Wesson, like, we believe that these people can all beat Tyson somehow, even though in the back of our minds we're like, Tyson's going to win this season. We get to know everybody else so well that we're like, could Tyson just be like, this is it? He was our shining star and he falls?
It kind of falls in that Aussie spot where it's like, if she makes Final Tribal, she's a threat to win, I think.
Absolutely.
Maybe she doesn't win, but she's a threat too.
And she's got the winner thing going on. So that's huge. But I think like what you just said, Phil, I think that like Tyson goes through such a good path, and it's really cool because it's not a Tyson that we're used to. He's still snarky and he's still funny, and he's always been competitive, obviously, but he's never been the like, I'm just going to kick ass and freaking win this game. He's always just kind of commenting on things. Yeah. So it's cool seeing him take a completely different path. And one, we see him cry, which you don't think he knows how to do, and then just bulldozes everybody.
I think Tyson in this season is So Tyson, and we get more of this in Winners at War. So it's kind of, and if of course you follow him on like Instagram or anything like that, you see like how much he like cares about his daughter, or I think he has 2 children now. But anyways, my point being is that Tyson's really grown up as a person between Heroes versus Villains and this season, and it's probably in good part due to Rachel. So it really helps, I think, for Tyson that Rachel's on the season, because if it's just a regular returnee season, I don't think Tyson plays with the same fervor that he does when he plays on this season with Rachel going home so early. And now he has like a real reason to be the Tyson we see this season versus the Tyson of the old seasons. Because Tyson of the old seasons is a ton of fun, but not good at strategy. Not going to win the game.
Yeah.
And I think we saw a mix of that on this season, because I think one of his best strategic, but also one of his most entertaining moves of this season was siding with Jervis. Him and Jervis are so much fun this season with the Coconut Bandits.
Yeah.
But I also think that it's one of his best strategic moves, because by doing that, he's positioning himself to sit at the final tribal council with somebody he knows he's going to beat every single time. He knows he's not going to lose to Jervis, because he sees how everybody feels about Jervis, because every time they go to the freaking Redemption Island, he just gets screamed at nonstop.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen. And so that was one of his best moves. And honestly, what could have ended up hurting him was Monica Culpepper, but he knew, based on what had happened with Brad, people just weren't respecting Monica Culpepper for whatever reason, even if they should have respected her more than they did.
I will say Jervis and his whole, I know this season really to emphasize where Jervis is like, yeah, we're the best. That's what you get. Like that kind of stuff. That is not new. If you go back to episode 1 of Borneo, Jervis did that when they won when Pagan won the very first.
He hasn't changed.
Challenge. Yeah. I went back to Borneo with the knowledge of blood versus water when I realized this, because if you just watch it, you don't think anything of it. But when you go back after watching Blood versus Water, Jervis is like, yeah, we're the best, Pagong, woo! He's like shooting guns up in the air. I'm making that part up, but it's basically what he's doing. He's like,
barely.
Wow, he hasn't changed. He's still Jervis. So.
And the problem was in this situation is you were pissing off the loved ones, and it was like you were screaming like that. And it was hurting people's feelings, where we really hadn't seen that in Survivor. When Tony's screaming final five, or whatever he's saying, final 6, whatever it ends up being, we don't feel as bad, because the other side's like, well, we don't really know Tony. But in this situation, when he's yelling that, you have Tina, who like, that's her daughter over there. And you have Tyson, who it's like, that's my girlfriend over there. And like, it was a lot more personal in this season, and that's what makes it a lot worse for Jervis, and ultimately why it's so smart for Tyson to just take Jervis with him. Yeah,
and you have poor Marissa, who's like, that's my goddamn uncle, or like, that's
I don't even know this jerk. I don't even know this guy.
I feel like the only reason Marissa's even here is because they want a Jervis. That's
totally.
Marissa's here. I will say though, if they ever do a legend season and they bring back one per season 1, I do hope it's Jervis. Like I really do. Out of everyone, I would love for them to bring back for like a legend season. And that, in my mind, a legend season is like no winners, by the way. Yeah. Jervis. I want Jervis. Because Jervis is such a great character. He brings so much character to a season. And Tyson working with Jervis is like this incredible combo the whole season. Because they're both like huge characters, but Tyson's like honed in on winning this game. And Jervis is like, in my mind, is almost playing the same game he did in Borneo. I know in Borneo it wasn't talked about, but Jervis did try forming an alliance that season. Just nobody in Pagong wanted to do it. And it became too late by the time they really figured it out. So Jervis didn't really have he didn't have a strategy background. So here's like his first season really having to do strategy, which, even though he's played Survivor before, he played a whole different game. So this is for him is almost like his first time playing, but not really.
Absolutely. I mean, it was his first time. I mean, the first time he played, they didn't do tribe swaps, they didn't do anything. It was literally the most pure version of the game. And now he's out there with idols, former winners, Redemption Island, players who have played the game 3 or 4 times. Like, he's out there with so many different elements. But again, like, good on Tyson for seeing how clueless Jervis was to the actual strategy portion of the game. Because while Jervis is a phenomenal character, there's no denying it, and he should have been asked back long before he played. Again, there's no way Jervis is ever going to beat you when you're as good of a player as Tyson is. Even if Tyson plays the same game he plays in Tocantins, but somehow makes it to final 2. If he's sitting next to Jervis, he wins the game, no matter how many people he pissed off, because Jervis will always piss off more people than you. And so, like, good on him for realizing that. But like you said, Wes, really what I give more credit to with Tyson's win here than I do with Boston Rob's win or with Cochran's win is because Tina was such a wild card.
Yeah.
And Tina coming back from the Redemption Island and making it to Final Four and very nearly getting into the final tribal council. That would have been disastrous, I think, for Tyson. And I think that Tyson probably loses because you had that all women's club over there with Katie and Sierra and Laura Moret, who really liked Tina a lot. And I think they all would have voted for Tina over Tyson, and Tyson not having a loved one over there probably would have ended up hurting him much the way that it ended up hurting Monica Culpep.
I do think another thing that really elevates Tyson's win is that he beats not only 2 Survivor winners, but he beat a Big Brother winner in Hayden.
Mm-hmm.
And Hayden, I know you guys aren't super familiar with Big Brother, and I only have a base knowledge of the season he won. But the season Hayden won, a Big Brother, he was in this 4-person alliance that they called the Brigade. And what they basically did, which I don't know if it ever worked in Survivor, was the 4 of them had fake Final 2 deals with other people. So each of them had their own Final 2 deal. And then the idea was to take this 8-person alliance without the other 4 people knowing about the inner 4, write it, and then cut off the outer 4 and then have them as the final 4. It didn't work out perfectly like that, but it basically did because like 3 of them made it like to the end of the game.
Pretty
so
impressive.
Hayden is not some idiot. He won Big Brother with actual strategy, not because by luck. So Hayden in my mind, not a Survivor winner, but he's like in my mind like half a Survivor winner. So and you saw it like here in the merge where he's like he gets Sierra to flip over to them, and Sierra was just like a sheep, for Tyson. Yeah. And Tyson can't keep Sierra, which is a kind of a knock against Tyson. But like Hayden's like making the obvious argument, like, Sarah, obviously you're the bottom of that foursome. Join us and at least have a chance. And he does it and successfully, and that causes that rock draw,
Yeah. And I know, like, I guess Sierra, what place does she even end up finishing? Is she still 5th? Or I guess she's still 5th. It's Hayden who ends up being like 7th instead of 6th or something. Whatever it ends up being. But
she has a shot because if Katie doesn't draw that rock and Jervis, Monica, or Tyson draws it.
But the thing was, in Tyson, again, another really important part of this, the only person who put himself at risk in the rock draw was Tyson. Hayden didn't have to do it. Monica didn't have to do it, and Jervis didn't have to do it. And Tyson gave himself a 1 in 3 chance of pulling the wrong color rock, but also knew that there was a 2 in 3 chance that the other alliance pulls the rock. So it was his best odds to do it too. And whoever wins there controls the rest of the game. So, it was really cool that like he stuck with that. And even though he was the one who was putting himself out there, he put himself out there for his alliance, and he proved that he'd be willing to put himself out there for his alliance. Yeah. And that was a big thing. But like you were just saying, Wes, you have 2 Survivor winners and a Big Brother winner on this season.
Yeah.
You also have Sierra, who goes on to be considered like one of the best female strategists in the history of the game. You have Vetus, who at the time everybody thought was really great. You have Laura Moret and Caleb, and you have like this cast is loaded.
Now, I would say Laura Moret's a great strategist, but
no. And I'm not saying she's
Brian.
I'm just saying she's a really good player. Like she's not a great player, but she's a really good player. Sure. Like Laura Moret is one of those players who's always going to do pretty well. And for her to come back into the game after being voted out, like that adds a lot to Tyson's game. You know what I mean? Like that makes it more difficult, especially since Tyson is one of the people who votes Laura Moret out of the game, like the first time. So it's difficult when you have to weigh all of those options and you're playing with players who actually know how to play the game, unlike Boston Rob, where Matt Elrod comes in and he's like, all right, I'm just going to get rid of Matt Elrod. I don't really give a shit.
Yeah. This to me is like what Fansworth's favorites 2 should have been. And in my mind, it's Fansworth's favorites 3. Something we haven't talked about that Tyson did, and I think he did it on top of – so he came into the season, in my opinion, with a super low threat level. He's this goofball in Token Teens. He goes in Heroes vs. Villains and basically makes what is considered like one of the dumbest moves in Survivor, or it looks like, at least on the surface, a dumb move when he gets voted out. I'm sorry, when Boston Rob gets voted out and then Tyson gets voted out shortly after.
Tyson goes first. It's Tyson who goes first because Tyson does the hot toss, and then Boston Rob goes home because of Tyson.
My bad. Yeah. Tyson basically blows up his game in Heroes vs. Villains.
Yep.
And so he comes in 7 seasons later. Both times he's played, he's just been simply being character. So he's not going to be looked at like Aris or Tina or even like, I know Jervis played season 1, but like Jervis is a bigger name than Tyson. He just is because of the season he played on. So Tyson.
I don't know about that.
I don't know.
Jervis as a name. I'm not saying Jervis is a player. Jervis as a name is a bigger.
But there was such a time gap.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing.
Tyson's a bigger name.
I gotta say here, Wes, I understand the point you're trying to make, but I actually think out of every single season that has had returning players, the returning players on this season were most even across the board in terms of threat level. From most threatening, which is Rupert, I believe, to least threatening, which is probably Cat. It's the most even it was across the board from Rupert to Cat because I don't even think Tina or Aris are considered the biggest threats on this season because Tina hadn't played since All-Stars. And I think people, because she was the first boot, people forgot how good she was or didn't think she could pull it off a second time.
Yeah.
And then Aris, nobody gave him credit for his win at this time. It really was this season that solidified his win. So I get what you're saying with Tyson's threat level being low. But I don't look at this as like Boston Rob and All-Stars and Amber and All-Stars because there wasn't a Tina, a Richard Hatch, an Ethan, a Rudy. Like I think these were very even across the board.
You also have a really good, probably one of the best arrays of like old, middle, and new at that time. And that's Winners at War like kind of did that, but I think this is one of the best assembled.
Well, what I was going to say, I understand. So I'm not saying he's like so far under, he's like a Boston Robin All-Stars. I'm just saying like, if we're to consider like all the favorites or all the returnees, I feel like Tyson, I know he's not like way down here, but in my opinion, he's in the bottom half of this cast of 10 or 8. I forgot exactly the number. I think
it's 10. It's 10.
So, but on top of that, he also gets injured really early on. And as we all know, he then milks his injury much longer than he actually has it. And that just keeps him in his spot instead of moving up. And of course, with his level and going early, that creates the singles alliance. It's a couple of like brilliant moves that he does on top of like his placement coming into the season. Like he doesn't come in like this and then go like that until he wins. It's more like he does this and stays here, and then at the right time jumps up.
And I'm looking at it now, and I would agree with you. I would say he probably came in with the 5th or 6th biggest target on his back, depending on how you look at it. Yeah. I would say Rupert, Tina, and Aris for sure were above him. I would say Candace was above him because she had just been on Heroes versus Villains.
And she made it further in Heroes versus Villains.
Absolutely. So I think that. And then I would say it would probably be Tyson, and then it would be Jervis. I would put it that order. And then I would say it's probably Monica Culpepper, and then Colton, and then you're looking at Laura Moret and Kat, who nobody really was talking about coming into this season. Yeah. So I would say he's 5 or 6 on that list. And I understand the point you're making here. It's like, so he's coming in, but I think like in terms of what has won previously in these returning player seasons, like, and I'm talking about like at least half of the cast.
Women.
Yes, women is one. But when you look at Amber, no threat level coming in. Mm-hmm. Parvati, no threat level coming in. Cochran, decent threat level coming in, but that's only because of who he was really playing with. It's not so much that I think people thought Cochran was a great player. I just think that who he was playing with, him and Tyson are probably on about the same playing field after their first time playing. It's just that Cochran's coming in, now he's playing a second time with Francesca and all that. But I would say that Tyson probably played on, he didn't come in with a big target. He didn't come in as like the bottom of the barrel. No. And he played with a very even cast. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I would say him and Sarah Lucina are probably comparable in terms of what Sarah had to do on Game Changers with him here, where like, if you look at the returning players, it's like Tyson, he could do it, but he also could go away really quick. We don't know. But neither one of them
his game, not maybe ruined his game, but he almost like when he was a jerk to Katie on her way out, it was like, Tyson, you've been doing so good.
That's his one, like, what are you doing there?
Yeah, don't be Tocantins, Tyson. Just what are you doing? Stop it.
And that's the adrenaline, man. That was the adrenaline of drawing rocks in that situation. I get it, but you have to remember, like on the jury too, her mother is over there. And you he didn't see, but we see 2 seasons later, which we'll talk about next week or in the next episode. When you talk shit about somebody's daughter, it does not go over well. Like, let's just put it that way, as we see with Missy and Baylor. So, even if in the moment you're like, screw you, Katie, get the hell out of here. You got to remember Tina's over there, who is very well respected by every single member of the jury. So you got to be careful. Got to be careful.
Yeah. One slip up.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the one big slip up. It's the one time you're like, oh no, what was that? Why did you do that? And I totally get the adrenaline. In the moment, you don't think of it because we're not the ones with the adrenaline pumping from, this flip happening and having to draw rocks by Sierra. But yeah, I get that. I do want to mention he almost had a perfect, not maybe perfect jury, I don't know what you call it, where he gets all the votes. He almost had all the votes. I think Vetus just threw his vote at Monica so she'd be second.
He didn't want Jervis to get second. Exactly.
Yeah, he did it almost in spite of Jervis.
I love that kind of pettiness. And we'll talk about that again in Missy and Bailey's season, but I love that.
And can we also say too that Vetus ruined the perfect game twice because Tyson only receives one vote on this season, and it's from Vetus when Vetus gets voted out of the game.
No, Tyson gets 2 votes, I thought.
Oh, you're right. He does. He gets a vote from Tina as well when Tina gets voted out. You're correct. You're correct. But I'm just saying, it's funny how Vetus really screwing Tyson here. Like
both. I just double checked. Both votes were in the same episode, though.
Oh, it was a double
really?
boot.
It was a double boot, I believe.
Gotcha.
It was episode 9. It says, yeah.
Gotcha.
That was funny. Tyson here though plays such a great game that Tyson can never win again.
No.
And Tyson's such a big name now. He's too much.
We see that in Winners at War. They were never going to let him get anywhere in that season.
Yeah.
Anywhere.
Because
he could never get his footing.
And it's almost like a curious thought. Like, if you win a returnee season, are you a bigger threat than if you won your first season? Like in Winners at War, I'm trying to think of who was a returnee that made it far. Jeremy made it pretty far, but he became a target. And Sarah, I guess, really is the one who made the furthest winning on a returnee season. Though with all the preview stuff before for Winners at War, everyone's talking about how Sarah was like their number 1 target because of her Game Changers game.
Yeah.
She did a good job avoiding that.
Well, and I think people do respect it more when you can navigate because they can say, "Oh my God, she beat Sandra and Tony and all of that," and now Sandra and Tony are they're going the opposite way. So I do think that that's something to take into account for sure.
Yeah, I guess we just don't have a lot of examples of people who won a returnee season and then came back again after that. Besides Amber losing Winners at War, I'm trying to think all the returnee winners. Yeah, Parvati. Parvati comes back in Heroes vs. Villains, does really well, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
But people were still terrified of her. They
yes,
didn't want her to go as far as she did. That's for sure.
That's credit to Parvati. That's what that is.
Absolutely. What were the confessionals like in this season, Wes? Before we
Sure. So Philippines, we had 8 single-digit. Caramon, we had, I'm double checking real quick, 4. This season we had 4 again, but they're all within the first 5 boots.
Yeah.
Colton being the exception with double digits. So take a guess at Tyson's confessional count.
44.
I was about to say 45.
Well, stay with 45. 48 was what he got, so very close.
Redemption Island seasons are always kind of weird.
Yeah, this season held pretty consistent with the overall confessional count. Caramon at 413. This is 419. I'm double checking. I'm a Laura Moret. That'd been amazing. Sierra had the second most at 46. And then it goes Monica with 34, and then tied with Vetus at 34, tied with Hayden at 34, though they were all booted in different orders.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, you have like Jervis 25, Tina 24, Laura Moret 18, Katie Collins 20, Caleb 15, RS 19. Another thing with RS, remember when Tyson really built up RS as to be like this idiot?
Yeah, I know, and that was part of his strategy.
Yeah, he was like, "Oh, just ignore RS. He's always constantly screwing things up."
Yeah,
it's such a good job.
It was, and he needed to because RS versus Tyson really was like the storyline of the first half of this season. Other than at least what was going on with the favorites, because what was going on with the fans was all that was just chaos. But it is it's hard, I think, for Survivor when they do Redemption Island seasons and Edge of Extinction seasons to evenly disperse the confessionals to the people who are actually in the game. Because they spend so much time with the people off of the game that it makes it harder for them to really make sure everybody's getting a lot of confessionals in the season because they have to make sure their winner gets some in Tyson, and then it makes it harder to give Jervis some and all of that. They still give them all a pretty good amount, but when you're spending a third of your episode over at Redemption Island, it's hard to make it completely even for everybody.
I think this is the only season of Redemption Island where it's like it worked out. If it was an overall positive versus an overall negative like the other 2 times.
Mm-hmm.
Though Ozzy almost made it an overall positive with the way he did it in South Pacific, but still, I would say. I think what's crazy is all these times that Survivor wants to do these people coming back in the game. The only time I feel like they truly did it right, or at least got the closest doing it right, was the Outcast twist. Because instead of doing one returning at the merge and one at like final 6 or 7, they just did them both at the same time at the merge, and it just made both those characters more memorable. And we weren't like, it wasn't like final 6 and we're like, who's Lil or who's Burton? I feel like that's the only time it's like, the only thing is that then they try to trick us, which is not the way to do it.
Yeah.
And of course, having the people do their like, oh, I'm so glad I played Survivor. Also, I'm angry that people voted me out. Like that whole thing.
Yeah.
It seemed so blindsiding us is not the right way to go, but I feel like that's the time they did it correctly. I feel like if they ever do Redemption Island or Edge of Extinction, God forbid, ever again, something like this, if they decide to iterate on it, just have them both come back to the merge.
I agree.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody always argues for, is that's what ruins the season, is that Chris Underwood comes back at final 5 or final 6, whatever it is. And that Tina comes back at final 5.
Yeah.
Remember, if there is no if there is no Redemption Island at this point, on this season, I don't think Tyson goes to Rocks. I think he lets Monica take it, or whoever gets the votes. I think it's Monica who gets the votes. I think he votes Monica out and says, "I'll just win the next 2 challenges and get to the final 3," because it's not worth risking $1 million at final 6. You're so close to the end anyway. Just make it 3 more days.
I know the rock draw is interesting, but I think that would have made Tyson's journey to the end harder, but also a little bit more interesting because it was like almost a foregone conclusion once Katie goes, if it wasn't already before. But it's like really at that point, a foregone conclusion he's gonna make to the end and win. But if Katie isn't the easy out on the rocks, instead he has to vote out Monica, for example, then it becomes like, well, now Tyson's on the bottom with Jervis.
Yeah,
now he has to earn his way,
Yeah.
And then whoever goes back Redemption better be somebody that works with Tyson.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, I mean, that was a big moment. That was definitely a big moment. That happening.
I'm sorry, nobody would have come back Redemption in our changed thing. I'm sorry. No, it would be nobody would coming back. My bad.
Yeah. All right, let's jump over to the King of Survivor.
Wait. Does Tyson's archetype ever win again?
No, I don't think so. Because I think it only wins
him.
because it played 3 times.
Too dominant.
I think the archetype here is more like a goofy person who plays and then comes back and is more serious, which in a way you could say is Tony, but Tony won his first time. So I don't know. I don't know if there's somebody who's goofy and then comes back and like matures, I think, and understands the game better second time. Possible. It's kind of what we saw in Cochran. He was goofy in a different way, but I think Tyson specifically obviously can never win again.
Yeah, I mean, he's also like John Cochran's not mean to people. Tyson was mean to people in all of his seasons.
Cochran's mean to himself.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's jump over to the King here. Let's jump over to Survivor Cagayan for Tony.
Why I'm wearing the DeCall buff is for Tony. Tony.
There you go. So we're going over to Tony Vlachos. You guys might have heard of him. He might have won Winners at War.
Yeah.
But we're going to be talking about his Survivor Cagayan game here, which at the time, I think when this season happened, and I think like this was my senior year of college, and I remember like this was when we were gearing up for actual graduation. I think the general consensus was, how the hell did this guy just do this? I remember me and my family, we used to do a thing where we would pick one man and one woman to win the game. And we would do just a schoolyard pick, and you could pick a man or a woman or whatever. Tony Vlachos was the last person picked for that game. If I was doing this podcast, nobody would have drafted Tony Vlachos in their game. His pregame press made him seem like such an idiot. He was Russell Hantz, but like just as moronic, and was never going to make it as far because he was such like, how could you do this in season 28? And it took about 2 episodes before every single person was like, who is this guy and how is he doing this? But I got to say, like, again, all those people who just started watching Survivor in like season 34, season 35, something like that, you need to understand that the pregame press for Tony in season 28, we all thought he was going to be that dumbass who gets voted out in 18th, 17th, 16th. His ceiling is 14th place. He can never, ever win Survivor, which is what makes it even more amazing that he's the only man to ever win Survivor twice.
I wasn't reading pregame press at that time, but I remember watching it throughout and saying, he's not going to win. He's not going to win. He's not going to win. You're up until that final immunity challenge. I'm like, this guy's not going to win. And then he wins.
And then he wins.
And then the exact same thing happened at Winners of War. It's unreal.
I was amazed because I did not watch Tony's season, his season live. So unfortunately, I was like all the way up through Blood versus Water. I went unspoiled in terms of like who was going to win the season when I went back to rewatch later after these seasons already aired. But Cagayan, I unfortunately through osmosis found out like that he was the winner because everyone was just so Tony crazy. But even if I didn't know that, I feel like he is like such an like I know he's crazy, but like if you look past that, and I know sometimes it's hard to do, if you look past craziness and look at like Tony and like how he's positioned in the season, how dominant he is in terms of like he's the narrator, he's like right on every single vote, he's going crazy. But it's almost like if you ignore the bad and just look at the good, it's like clearly he's gonna be the winner, right? Like who like maybe you can argue Spencer. I was a big fan of Spencer, but I already knew Tony was gonna win, so maybe it influenced me.
It definitely did. Because I'll tell you this, as the season was airing, a lot of people thought it was going to be Spencer, or they thought that it was going to be Trish or Tasha. Those were the three people that people really felt were going to win it. They thought everybody thought Tony was going to get cut at some point. Like there was no way that guy was getting a final two. And that's why like nobody thought Wu was going to make it as far as he did. That was really the big surprise to a lot of people, was that Wu made it.
Being a surprise. I totally get Wu being a surprise because he's like non-existent until the merge.
And that's why like when the finale starts and Spencer's the first person to go home, everybody's like, is Tony going to win this or is it going to be Wu? And then it's like, well, maybe it's going to be Cass, but like it didn't make sense because the whole time you're just waiting for Tony to lose the game, and he never lost the game. Because that's why Cagayan is generally considered one of the best seasons, is because the cast was amazing. And whatever you want to say about the cast now with LJ or whatever, but you have Sarah, Morgan, LJ, Jeremiah, Jeffra, Tasha, Trish, Spencer, Cass, Wu, and Tony. That's a
great boot order.
It's a great boot order, and that's your merge. Are you kidding me? Like that's amazing. It's just absolutely phenomenal. And so like, especially the whole time when you're like, there's no way Tony's going to pull this out. Which normal person is going to pull out this win on this season? That's all you're thinking about the first time you watch this when you don't know Tony's going to win. And it's amazing he pulls it out.
After seeing crazy people like in my mind, crazy is Cochran and Tyson. Tony, to my mind, just the next level of crazy. I know he's like wild in energy.
Cochran, really?
Cochran and Tyson are not normal people. I do not meet Tyson and Cochran in everyday life. Like
we got to move to LA. They're right outside.
I don't live in LA.
Yeah, or more, I guess more normal as in like normalish players. Like Tony is not a normal player. He's bananas.
Sure. To me, like normal is Denise, Kim, Sophie. Like those are like that's a normal stretch of winners to me. Like these are people I feel like I can meet just walking outside. But like Cochran, Tyson, and Tony, I'm not meeting these people anytime soon. Like this is a very unique set of people. So if he had come on the heels, I think, of Denise winning, I may have been like, there's no way. But I feel like after Tyson, I'm like, if Tyson can win, I guess anybody.
Yeah, but the thing is, Tyson won as a returning player. Tyson won on a very emotional storyline from a guy that we didn't see get emotional storylines his first two seasons. Tony came out and played the Russell game. I mean, but he played it socially. But what I'm saying,
the social part,
he played the social part of the Russell game. But still, like when you're watching that, like nobody has ever won the game playing like Tony, and nobody has won the game since playing like Tony. Tony's the only one. Tony's the only one who's been. But Tony couldn't even play in Winners at War the same way he played in Cagayan. Like it's not a style that can be pulled off. And I think like. That's why, like, I still sit there, and when you're watching, you're like, there's no way this is going to be the representative this season. Like, Spencer, you can wrap your mind around. That's Cochran. Like, Spencer is Cochran, you know, or you can wrap your mind around maybe Trish or Tasha winning. You can maybe even wrap your mind around Wu and just be like, oh, okay, like, it's just one of those things that happens. Yeah. But Tony, we had never seen up till that point. We'd always seen it somehow fall apart, and we haven't seen it since.
I mean, it's fair. I said I was a little bit influenced by the fact that I did know he was going to win, but I definitely wouldn't. I would have put him, just watching it without knowing that, I would have put him in like my top 5. But I do think a lot of that's because I noticed a lot of the time that Trish was covering Tony's butt, and Tony wasn't covering his own butt a lot. Trish was constantly like, wow, why did Tony betray me? And like, Trish's like, it's fine. Tony, you guys are good. Like Tony, you know, like always like. It was like Trish is like should have got part of this check because Trish is constantly covering for Tony.
Well, that's Alexa's girl. They have the same accent. Alexa, talk about Trish.
I love Trish. Trish has a wicked accent.
Yeah, wicked accent.
But yeah, I agree with you. And really the moment that threw people off. So Tony all of a sudden at the beginning, it's like we don't see him go to tribal council. His tribe keeps winning. We're all focused on the other people, and we start to see him get his footing in the game. And then they go to that tribal council where he votes out Cliff. And everybody's like, whoa, what did he just do? Like him and Trish just sided with Jeffrey and LJ to go against Lindsay, Cliff, and Woo. Why did they not just stick and vote that out? And that was like the first time we're like, okay, this guy's playing a game here. And then the moment, though, that everybody thought he was going to lose was when they hit the merge and Sarah goes home and he starts clapping. That clap is the moment where we all said there's no way this guy wins. Yeah. Like when Spencer said Cass 0% chance of winning, I'm pretty sure all of America said, yeah, Tony too. Like there was no way he was going to win the game after that. And so like the fact that he could get away with those really aggressive moments shows you how crazy of a season Cagayan is, because players don't get away with those really blatant shows of like almost like disrespect at that point. But they don't get away with that.
I think a part of that though is you can attribute is like all these big characters on the season, like the fact that like we had I'm double checking Cass. Yeah, Cass made to third, and Cass was like almost like from I don't know what episode, but it was really early on where she's already like being painted and being viewed as other people as like, I don't like Cass. Cass is the worst, and Cass is like way more subtle than Tony, obviously. But Cass is still like everyone's like, oh, I hate Cass. And when everyone's anger is directed at one person, it's really hard to notice this crazy guy over here. I mean, he's crazy, but like, I don't hate him. I hate her.
Well, he's obnoxious. He's playful. She sucks.
Yeah. And everybody hated Cass right off the bat because we're seeing this story from the eyes of Spencer. And that's why so many people thought Spencer was going to win, because we were seeing it from his eyes. And every time he'd go to tribal council, Cass was pretty much like, ha, 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 your fate is in my hands. And what's amazing is if you look at it, Cass goes to 4 tribal councils out of the 6 pre-merge tribal councils and doesn't get a single vote. Okay, think about that. Cass does not get a single vote. When does Cass get her first vote, everybody?
I got to double check. Do you already know?
I know it, so I want to see. Does anybody know? And don't look it up yet, Wes.
I am looking it up, but I'm not going to actually go to the webpage. Yeah, I'll wait.
Okay.
I guess she gets it. So I'm going to look at the episodes and like I'm looking at confessional counts. I'm going to guess she gets it. Don't tell me finale. Is it finale?
No, she gets it at the episode before the finale when Trish goes home. Trish votes for Cass. That's the first vote that Chaos Cass gets. And don't tell me that she was just a goat, because a goat is Philip Shepard and Natalie Tenorelli. Cass made humongous moves in this season. Cass is the reason why, like, she's the reason why Garrett goes home. She's the reason JT goes home. She's the reason Sarah goes home. Like, she is the reason for those votes. You know, it's not that she just voted that way. She was the reason the votes went those ways.
But I do think she falls into the Russell Hantz role of like, she made all these moves, but like, and she could get to the end, but she can't convince the jury. There's no way.
I think she could have convinced the jury if she was sitting next to Woo. She was never going to convince them against Tony. But all of that is just to say that, like, for as hated as Cass was and how everybody was just saying, we don't like Cass, she still made it so far into the game before she got any type of vote, which is crazy because, I mean, Russell got votes. You know, even though they didn't think he convinced the jury, Russell got votes. Even if they were negated by Idol or whatever happened, they still voted for Russell Hantz. And so, like, for Cass to make it that deep into the game is really, really crazy. Like, it really is before she gets any type of vote. And Tony, I think there's only 2 tribal councils that Tony actually gets votes, which is another impressive thing. Because how does somebody like Tony has played 3 seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what has he gotten? He's gotten votes at what? 3 tribal councils?
Oh, brother. I just double check. But he got 5 this season, that I do know.
He's also like either, I'm going to get this wrong. He's either never really played an Idol or never played one correctly.
Yeah, he never played the Idol in Cagayan, but having the Tyler Perry Idol definitely helped him. Yeah. And I love how they call it the Tyler Perry Idol when it's the first iteration of the Idol. Yet they're acting like
as if we're talking about as if it never happened.
As if Cook Islands and Panama. Nah.
Yeah, no, not at all. So yeah, we see Tony. Tony has that, and that definitely influences how he's able to play the game and how far he's able to make it. Like, because people are always scared. It was kind of like the Terry thing. You couldn't throw votes at Tony in a couple instances because you knew that he had that, but Tony didn't tell them that that's what the Idol was.
Yeah, that's true. I think people are just more afraid of an Idol versus a super Idol. Because in fairness, like, how he finds this Idol is like mind blowing, because I believe it was like there was obviously no clues for it, which of course Russell's proven, but like it wasn't like in a tree trunk, you know?
Right.
It wasn't like Island of the Idols where like Elaine's just like, I'm walking down the path. Oh, there's an idol in the tree trunk at like waist height. You know, it wasn't like that. It was like he had to like dig for this thing. Like, how did he even like, you know, craziness? If there was a clue, please correct me. I just don't remember.
No, and I don't even think there was. But the thing that Tony did was he lied and said that it was useful until the final 4.
Yes,
and that's what worked in his favor because people were like, "Oh my God, we can't get rid of him. We can't get rid of him. We can't get rid of him." And he never told them that it was actually something he could use after the vote, and that was part of his strategy to be like, "Vote for me, I dare you," because he knew that he'd be able to play it after the vote, even if he got all the votes.
Yeah,
but he was telling them all that it was the final 4, and that was brilliant about Tony was his bag of tricks. That's what he called it. It was his bag of tricks. And I don't think he ever really pulled all that much out of his bag.
He didn't. He just threatened with it.
No, the bag of tricks was just that. It was like a magician's bag, just a bag of tricks.
Yeah.
Just the whole bag is the trick.
That was it. Yeah, it's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I think he does play the idol, I think, at final. LJ plays his idol on Tony, and Tony's like, "You're an idiot." And then Tony plays his idol, and it doesn't do anything when I believe Trish who goes home. Because I think that was
he played for LJ, I think.
No, LJ played it for him.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying he played an idol for LJ. My bad.
No, LJ played it for him, and then Tony did play his idol at Final 5 when Trish goes home, just in case something crazy happened, because it was the last time he could play it. So yeah, never plays an idol correctly in the season, but that threat, and I think that has a lot to do with just Tony's personality, that threat that he could do this to you. It was just crazy.
He does play the idol? Because I thought that was part of the games that he still had it at Final 4, and he was telling people it's still good now. It's still good. It's still good through Final 4.
No, he didn't do it. He didn't have it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, he didn't have it. But everybody needed to get rid of Spencer at Final 4, so I don't think he was worried anymore because they knew he needed to get it up.
Okay, I'm double checking the wiki. It says all of the hidden immunity idol such powers expired at Final 5. Tony bluffed by claiming it could be played through Final 4. Blah blah blah. Yeah, Okay, I feel I'll trust you. I thought he still had it at Final 4, and that was part of like his whole shtick. Is that even at Final 4, people thought he was good, and it was a useless idol he could never play.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's what it was. It was LJ played one on him, and he played one on LJ.
That's why I was saying earlier. He played with LJ as like a return favor, but the actual Super Idol doesn't get played, and he still pretends like he can play it at 4, which is why Spencer goes when Tony probably could have gone. It was possible he could have gone there instead of Spencer, but Spencer goes, and everyone assumed Tony was good. So it's actually really worked out in his favor too or maybe not in his favor, but it really makes himself look better is when there is a Final 2 instead of a Final 3. Because like, oh, okay, so it makes sense that his idol would work through Final 4 because there's a Final 2. Yeah. By the way, out of left field, there's a Final 2.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, as we mentioned earlier, though, when it's like, oh, surprise Final 3 or surprise Final 2, Suri got screwed. Good winners, good players, the best players can adapt. Tony adapted at this Final 3, and when it became a Final 2, and it should have been a Final 3, as it's been for like 12 seasons.
Literally every season other than this.
Yeah. So Tony, being a great player, adapted his game, was able to get in that Final 2, even though he really should have been gone at 3 and possibly at 4.
One of the best sales pitches you see on Survivor.
Yeah. He completely leaned into what Woo was about, and he used it to his advantage and used it against Woo, and it was brilliant. And everybody says, everybody says, oh, like Woo made the stupidest move ever, but Tony influenced that very, very much. He really did. And also, I know we just talked about this in the podcast with Russell, so again, to date this podcast, but there's no guarantee Woo beats Cass. And I know people think that, but Cass is a lawyer. If she sits there at the final tribal, Woo did not do anything to convince anybody to vote for him. And I think they still would have been just as frustrated with Woo. It would have been closer, but it could have been 5-4 Cass wins because people would have been like, oh my God, Woo, you're not owning up to anything. Shut up with the honor and all of that.
Yeah, he did the coach route.
He went the coach route, and I don't think anybody would have cared. And so like people will call it the stupidest move, but I don't necessarily think it is. I'm just saying though, like Tony, good on him. Like what Tony did was it was just great. I mean, Tony did everything he was supposed to do, and he did it right. And that's a very underrated part of his game. It's not just that Woo made a bad move. It's that Tony convinced him it was in his best interest to make that bad move.
It's true. Tony,
Yeah.
but Tony does a lot of bad in this season, but it just like his good things were, it's like his high highs were so high that it makes up for like all these faults he has.
All the llama talk.
The llama talk.
Because he makes a lot of mistakes.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
Hilarious is not, should not have worked in his favor.
No,
Yeah.
the clapping, the llama talk, what he
Top
does to
five,
Trish.
baby.
Yeah, all that. Like it shouldn't have worked, and it does. And it does just because he's able to work his way through the game with what we come to learn is a very unlikable group of people, no matter who they are. That whole Final Four, we find out that like Spencer on second chances probably doesn't win this season if he gets to the end because people don't really like Spencer all that much.
Yeah.
And Tasha gets 0 votes. And then you have Wu who goes home pre-merge, and like that's what makes Cagayan so much fun is it's such a cluster cuss. But it is one of those seasons where you're just like, wow, every one of these players and the people we think are the heroes actually aren't heroes, as we come to learn in later seasons.
Yeah.
Just really awesome. It's just
Cagayan's
Cagayan's the best.
is possibly the biggest group of villains
Ever.
then, because
There's not a single person there to root for.
David Sampson, who of course goes out first, but like he's like the CEO of the Marlins or president. Like you immediately are like, oh, he's already rich. I don't know.
Yep.
And then you got Garrett Adelstein, who is a jerk. You got Jatia, who literally dumps the rice, but doesn't Garrett still go even though she dumps the rice?
She dumps the rice and Garrett goes. Yeah,
Garrett goes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then of course you have Tasha, who, by the way, by villain, we're just talking Survivor standards of villain, not like real life villains. Tasha, as we learned, Cambodia apparently isn't as likable as we thought. Spencer isn't as relatable, I guess, as we thought. And then Cass, of course, is just Cass, like Chaos Cass.
And somehow that's the tribe we all found ourselves rooting for.
Yeah. That's such a good job by the editors.
Amazing.
They did a great job.
Amazing. They convinced us that Spencer is a robbed goddess. Wes, give me some confessional counts here, because I know this one makes a little bit more sense. And what makes Cagayan such a good season is that aside from Jeremiah and aside from Jeffra, and pretty much aside from Wu, because he doesn't get as many confessionals, but Wu got enough, I think. This was a pretty evenly edited season for the people who made it deep into the game.
So I do want to bring up some big numbers here because we're going to talk about Tony. So I want to bring up some records. So we have Richard in Borneo with 92, Colby in Australian Outback with 98, Rob Sesternino in the Amazon with 94. I'm just looking through up the seasons real quick, see who is in the 90s or above. I don't think maybe we don't have another one until Russell, because then it gets more evened out.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Russell's the next one at 108 in Samoa. Yes, it is. And then you have Boston Rob in Redemption Island with 97. Okay, keeping in mind, those are like the numbers I'm looking at right now. What do you think Tony has in this season?
94.
I was going to say 80.
No, Tony has 97.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow.
He's literally on par with Boston Rob. He has one less than Colby. He is like the third most confessionals, tied with Rob, at this point in the game of all time. And I don't think even since him there's been somebody with 90-something.
But what's so good about Tony here, and what's so good about Cagayan, is start talking about some of these other players with their confessional accounts.
So we single digit wise, we have 5 people single digits, though it's 5 within the first 6 boots. Mm-hmm. Garrett Adelstein's the only one with double digits. So the going in order after that first 5, you have Alexis with 12, Sarah with 26, Morgan, the pillow, with 15, LJ 23, Jeremiah with 12, Jeffra with 16. So like not a lot of confessionals for that group.
Well, LJ has a good amount because LJ's in so few episodes. I remember people thought LJ could possibly be the winner of the season at the time. Jeremiah and Jeff are really nothing, but then after that, it really picks up, right?
Yeah.
Sarah Lucina had 26 in like 6 episodes, so she averaged out really high. And of course, by the way, so I knew, of course, I'd watch Game Changers for watching this, that Sarah is going to end up winning the game. So I did see like a lot of hints. We'll talk about this when we get to Game Changers, but a lot of hints of Sarah's Game Changers game in Cagayan in the first. But anyway, so yeah, like her and LJ are the only ones with like real big confessional counts for the first through the final 7. Then you reach Tasha. Tasha's 27. Doesn't seem like a big number. Trish 22. Doesn't seem like a big number. It's really the final 4 with all the big numbers. You got Spencer 68, Cass 62, Wu with 36, and Tony with 97.
Mm-hmm. And I think the thing was, though, that worked here is that Cass and Spencer had so much and Tony had so much, but we expected that from those types of characters. And we had seen in Philippines and in One World and things like that, that there would be characters who would have fewer confessionals but still win, like Denise and things like that. And Trish and Tasha seemed like the types of people who could win the game. Their personalities just aren't as big as Spencer, Cass, and Tony. Like Tony getting 97 confessionals or whatever it is doesn't seem out of character because that's the type of character Tony is. We expect him to get that many confessionals. We expect Spencer to get that many. We expect Cass to get that many.
Yeah.
Still, it doesn't necessarily mean we think that they're going to win the game because some of those other characters, I mean, every one of them, including Jeffra and Jeremiah, were on pace to be into the 20s at least by the end of the season had they made it to the end. And we've seen seasons where the winners do barely have over 20. I mean, Sophie Clark had just won with 23 or whatever it was.
Yeah,
so
it was like nothing.
It wasn't outrageous, especially think about it. If Jeremiah and Jeffra both make it 3 more episodes and then are in the finale, they probably end the season with close to 35 confessionals. So it wasn't as poorly edited of a season as those numbers might
Jeremiah
anticipate.
and Jeffra averaged like 1.2 for Jeremiah, 1.45 for Jeffra. So I'm not sure if they would reach that because Woo averaged 2.5.
I'm saying if they won the game, though. Like I'm saying if they were to go on to be the winner and one of those bigger characters gets voted out, they might get 5 confessionals in episode 6 confessionals and then 11 in the finale. And all of a sudden they're at 30 something, you know? Okay. So I think it was a very well edited season where you had your big characters and you were just like, okay, now who's going to be the normal person who kind of sneaks in and wins the game?
Sure. Yeah, no, I totally get it. What a stellar cast, though.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And another reason why Tony's win is always considered one of the greatest of all time, even before he wins Winners at War, is just because it was a chaotic game, but he beat just an unbelievable cast of players. Just an unbelievable cast of players.
I will say I'm looking at Woo on Survivor Wiki. It's so like most Survivor cast pictures, when you go between them, it's like the photography has changed so much, like most of the time between seasons. But like Woo is hilarious. You look at Cagayan and then you go to Cambodia, it's like his hair just grows. Like nothing else.
Yeah.
That's it. His hair just gets longer. Like the background changes, but like ignoring that, Woo, same smile, same look. Somehow is able to do like almost everything exactly the same, like 3 years later. His hair is just longer.
Well, no, it was the thing was it was only a year and a half later. It was 3 seasons later, but it was only a year and a half. And I think what works in Woo's favor is that when you're as fit and as young as Woo is, you don't look like you age in the matter of a year and a half because Woo is just that fit.
I know he's an actor. He's just like he does like the same exact everything's exactly the same.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Do we have anything else we want to say about Tony here, about his Cagayan game? I mean, it's probably the most discussed one.
Okay, clearly wins again.
I do think. Let me see. We talked about the Super Idol. He lied about how long it lasts. Convinced Woo to take him the end. Llama talk very sloppy. He did vote with the majority every single time. Mm-hmm. He's the first winner to do that since Natalie White. Surprisingly enough,
they have a lot in common.
Look at that. Tony and Natalie White. Who would have thought they'd be in the same sentence?
He's the first one since Natalie White. We've completely glossed over how he lied about being a construction worker and how he's part of Cops R Us with Sarah and how he screwed Sarah over, I guess.
And how he thought that being a cop would be detrimental to his game because people would like him too much and he wanted to be a villain. And it's like, I mean, nobody cared, Tony.
An evil construction worker. And he did 1.2 in the merge where he talks about like, oh, well, in my job, I have to do this. And everyone's like, you're not a construction worker. Like,
everyone already knows he's a cop, but Jeff Probst has never heard this directly from Tony. So Tony's still trying to pull the wool over Jeff's eyes.
That's the best part of it. I love it. I love every second of it. All right, well, let's call it quits. Tony's amazing. Obviously, to end on Tony is always great. We're going to go into our next grouping, which will be the greatest grouping that ever is or ever was or ever will be. It's like Karth. We have Natalie Anderson. She's not the reason. We have Mike Holloway. He's not the reason. We have Jeremy Collins. He's not the reason. And then we have the queen, Michelle Fitzgerald. And by the way, guys,
log off after an hour and a half.
I wanted to say for both of you, actually, next week's episode is still going to be 2 hours, but we're going to do 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, hour and a half, where we talk about Michelle for a complete hour and a half. We just go on. We talk about like what she was like as a child, how well she excelled at school, all these great things about her, which led to her ultimately being the greatest Survivor winner of all time. I want to say too, and I know people are going to listen to this as time goes on throughout history, but before we actually get to that podcast, I'm getting so much hate. Alexa, you are too. We are getting so much hate for our listen to this, for our Russell Hantz top 100 lists, because everybody's saying we hate Phil and Alexa that they're going to put Michelle in the top 5. And I don't feel like listening to them describe why she belongs in the top 5. And it's so funny to me because I didn't put her in the top 5. Only Alexa did. So
I didn't. She's nowhere
no,
near my top
no,
5.
neither one of us have her in the top 5. It was just so funny to me that we're already getting proactive hatred for something that we didn't do, which I think is fascinating. And that's the internet in 2020, ladies and gentlemen. But anyway,
I know.
I'm glad that
Michelle
Michelle will last
2 hours next week. If you want to talk about Michelle for extra, but no, we'll everyone be rest assured. We're going to talk about everyone about 30 minutes each. So
yeah, well, that's what Wes is going to think going into.
We might
buckle up, Wes.
okay. I'm just saying everyone else will get their fair due.
Buckle up.
Everyone else.
I will be comparing every single player though to Michelle. But actually interesting that we end on Tony here, and then our next episode is going to be talking about the second place and third place finishers of Winners at War. So I think it is kind of an interesting dynamic there. And then the other players we're going to be talking about are Jeremy, who has a questionable game in Winners at War, and then Mike Holloway, who a lot of people felt should have been on Winners at War. So make sure to tune in next time because we have a lot going on. Wes, tell everybody where they can find you.
Sure, yeah, I'm on Once Upon an Island. I am Once Upon an Island. I'm the Once Upon an Island YouTube channel. Just today, I dropped the story of Jenna Maraska and her win in the Amazon. So it's like a 40-minute video. It's a big one. So if you're ever wondering, like, why is it that everyone looks at Jenna as such a villain? Why is she portrayed such a villain? Actually, really, I feel like more so than any other story video, really dive into like how the editors are burying Jenna on purpose. Because no time did I ever feel like before Jenna, like was somebody just completely buried, like almost unfairly buried on purpose, like to make her personally look bad. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but I may have mentioned it when we talked about it. It's been so many weeks. But when, if you remember when like Jenna gets her letter and then we go back to camp and we hear from Matt out of all people, Matt's like, Jenna didn't deserve a letter. Matt, what is your place? Well, it's not your place to talk about this. So they do so many things like that I feel like when you watch the Jenna video, you'll be like amazed by how many times they like are burying Jenna for like no reason, just to make her look bad. And it's the whole thing.
Jenna's great. Rewatching Amazon, you do see how much they try to be like, isn't she so whiny and just a terrible?
And I mean, like, Jesus,
it is a fact though. If you're in a sorority, you're just a terrible person. I mean, I've been podcasting with somebody from a sorority for the last 5 freaking years, and I hate every second of it. So
and it's been terrible.
It's been terrible.
$1 million though.
That's true. And she just said dollars, so you know she's tired because she's turning into a Bostonian.
I've been spending way too much of my quarantine time in Massachusetts.
Yeah. Alexa, take us home in some sort of way. And also, I know that we don't want to date these, but because the podcast we're going to be doing Wednesday night actually is going to be relevant no matter what, maybe you can just say it anyway.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. I know we keep saying we're not going to date these, and I think we've dated.
This one is worth dating, though, because the podcast that we're referencing is one that won't be dated, just like this won't be dated.
Very good point. Yes. So you can find us on all social media at Survivor Specialist, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll be back same time next Monday talking about perhaps the greatest winner of all time and 3 other people for 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, and 7 hours. But this coming Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m.
8 p.m. and 5
p.m. Eastern.
Oh, you're going to do it during Russell's Top 100? Uh-oh.
I know. We had planned it before we knew that was going to happen, but that's okay. Everybody. Sorry.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I was just going to say sorry, everybody, but I'm going to watch it as soon as this
we'll
podcast
watch
is over.
It's because they're awesome. And make sure to tune into that because all 3 of us have been a part of that. And it's been very, very well done. It's a really, very well done. Release.
Am I in the next episode, Wes?
I don't watch the episode. All I get is like who the next 10 is, and then I do the transitions. I don't get to watch the whole thing. I don't know.
That's no fun.
Lame.
You don't get the insider info.
Really take us.
10 is that's it. I can't say anything.
But this Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, we have a very special guest. She's a little different from who we usually talk to. She's a huge Survivor fan, which I didn't know. Her name's Sierra Schultze, and she's huge on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I follow her on Instagram. She puts out some really good stuff. And again, she doesn't put out a lot of Survivor content, but she's a huge fan. And we're thinking, especially after this season and just the way the world is right now, a lot of players get crap on social media. So we're going to have a big conversation just about how people act on social media, what putting yourself out there does, and just kind of having a big conversation about that. We're going to probably talk about, all the different shaming that goes on in social media and maybe how you can kind of use it for good. So I think it'll just be a different kind of conversation. I think it's really applicable, and I think you guys will enjoy it. So tune in for that.
Yeah, she's going to be a good one. And she even said, she goes, I'm not a specialist. And I was like, but you understand how social media works. And like, you're going to be playing on Survivor season 41, Survivor season 42, Survivor season 55. I feel like it's going to be something that's worth listening to, because this is a girl who knows how to navigate social media and knows how to do this. Wes, it sounds like you know who she is.
Yeah.
Well, I have heard of her, and I know she has like over 1 million subscribers.
Yeah, she does.
She's the right person.
No big deal, right?
She's a social media specialist. So.
She is a social media specialist. She definitely is. And I think that it'll be a really interesting conversation. So make sure to tune into that, guys, on Wednesday night at 5 p.m. But until then, we'll see everybody again next Wednesday, or in 3 minutes if you're listening to this on audiobook, or if you're literally listening to this when Wes throws it all together in 1 second, you'll hear me say, and welcome back. Okay. Good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
All right, bye.